Chapter 258. Everything had happened too quickly. Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi should have returned together and locked Zhang Yixie and Duanmu Yarrow outside the door. But who knew that things would turn out like this? Han Yunxi was still in a daze. When she was pushed out of the secret chamber, she could only watch helplessly as Long Fei Yi brought another woman into the secret chamber. She fell right next to him, but he didn't stop. This feeling was really terrible. Actually, Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi were both caught off guard. As soon as he landed, he immediately pushed Duanmu Yarrow aside and rushed towards the door without even looking at her. But all he saw was Zhang Yixie clutching Han Yunxi's neck with a warning look on his face. "Let go of her, or this prince won't let you off." Long Fei Yi's rage soared to the heavens. At the side, Jiyu couldn't be bothered with Mu Linga anymore. He anxiously said, "Zhang Yixie, if you want to settle the score, come in first." If Zhang Yixie still didn't come in, the flesh-eating rats would be here soon. Unexpectedly, Zhang Yixie actually demanded an exorbitant price. "This prince can go in, but all of you have to come out. Otherwise, this prince won't be willing to go in." What an unwillingness. You have to be willing even if you don't want to. Jiyu flashed his folding fan and was about to make a move, but Long Fei Yi didn't waste any words. He had already pulled out the whip at his waist and stepped out of the door. However, Zhang Yixie immediately tightened his grip on Han Yunxi's neck. He said coldly, "This prince can kill her first." When he said this, Long Fei Yi and Jiyu both stopped. Zhang Yixie was going all out. Either he and Han Yunxi lived, and Long Fei Yi and the others all died to the flesh-eating rats, or he and Han Yunxi died to the rats, and everyone in the secret chamber lived. He did not give Long Fei Yi a second choice, nor did he leave a way out for himself. He was betting on just how important this woman was in Long Fei Yi's heart. Who knew how important this woman was in Long Fei Yi's heart? In any case, she herself didn't know. Han Yunxi's neck was tightly choked. She couldn't breathe and couldn't speak at all. At this moment, she was the most dangerous one. It was very likely that Zhang Yixie would kill her before the flesh-eating rats could reach her. However, her face was expressionless. She looked at Mu Linga, then at Long Fei Yi and Duanmu Yarrow. Her gaze was deep and unfathomable. Wasn't she afraid? She was afraid, but she had experienced this kind of despair too many times in her life. Even if she was afraid, it was useless. Doing good only to be repaid with evil. Using love only to be ruthlessly repaid. She was always the one covered in wounds. When she heard Zhang Yixie's condition, Duanmu Yarrow immediately shouted angrily, "Zhang Yixie, what do you mean by this?" Zhang Yixie actually wanted her to leave. Zhang Yixie was poisoned, and she had helped him a lot along the way. This guy was kicking her to the curb after she'd outlived her usefulness. Didn't they agree that she would cooperate with him and he would help her kill Han Yunxi? Who would have thought that he would dare to take Long Fei Yi's life? Duanmu Yarrow had overestimated the weight of her words. No one paid her any attention. "Zhang Yixie, think carefully. If Han Yunxi dies, you'll die too." Only the heavens knew how angry Jiyu was. He had never called Poison Lass by her full name before. Mu Linga was frightened. She knew that Chi brother didn't have time to settle scores with her now. Once all this was over, she didn't know how Chi brother would treat her. A trace of regret flashed through her heart. Mu Linga gritted her teeth. She couldn't ignore it even if she wanted to. She tried her best to tell herself that she wasn't wrong. Zhang Yixie didn't even bother with Jiyu. The only enemy in his eyes was Long Fei Yi. He said slowly, "Long Fei Yi, we don't have much time left. Should he trade everyone's lives for Han Yunxi's, or should he turn around and close the stone door so that Zhang Yixie and Han Yunxi would be buried in the rats' bellies?" Long Fei Yi was caught between a single thought. In a flash, everyone turned to look at Long Fei Yi. At this moment, the man in white who was hiding behind the stone also looked at Long Fei Yi. He didn't leave. His brows were tightly knitted and he was ready to make a move. Unfortunately, his injuries were too serious. Blood was still flowing from the corner of his mouth, staining a large patch of his white mask red. Just now at the Shen Gold door, he had used up all his internal energy to reach that speed. Now, he was powerless. However, He still paid attention to Han Yunxi and the others. He still worked hard to circulate his internal energy. Even if he could become a cripple, he didn't care. Because this woman's blood had opened the Xian gold door. He was sure that she was the person he needed to protect in this life. She was also the meaning of his life in this world. More and more blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. He continued to circulate his internal energy and didn't give up. On the other side, Long Fei Yi finally made a decision. He said, "One life for several lives. This prince won't do this kind of unprofitable business." When these words came out, everyone was shocked. Han Yunxi's deep eyes finally couldn't light up anymore and immediately dimmed. This was Long Fei Yi's choice. How cruel. Long Fei Yi, are you sure? Zhang Yixie was very surprised. The hand that was strangling Han Yunxi relaxed. However, Long Fei Yi was waiting for this opportunity. Just now, he had been looking for Zhang Yixie's weakness. He couldn't give up on Han Yunxi. He could use everyone's lives to exchange for Han Yunxi, but it was a very stupid thing to do. He was as calm as ice and was never an impulsive and brainless person. Taking advantage of Zhang Yixie's relaxed vigilance, Long Fei Yi narrowed his eyes and focused on Zhang Yixie's shoulder. Waves of internal energy secretly poured into the soft whip in his hand. Only the heavens knew how much strength he used in this whip. His forehead was already covered in sweat. In the silence, Han Yunxi looked at him. Her eyes seemed to have lost focus, but he didn't have time to care. He looked at Zhang Yixie's fatal weakness and was about to lash out. But, in the end, human calculations were no match for heaven's plans. Just as Long Fei Yi was about to lash out with his whip, there was a sudden rumble from the top of the stone door. A giant boulder tumbled down with it, followed by a giant rat. This scene was so familiar. Didn't the flesh-eating rat come from the front? The movement in front was very close. Could it be that it was above their heads? Everyone subconsciously raised their heads and saw a black mass of flesh-eating rats pouring down like a torrential downpour. One after another, they fell down. Heavens, there were actually 2 nests of flesh-eating rats. Long Fei Yi and Ji Yu retreated almost at the same time. They were almost smashed. These flesh-eating rats were blocking the large stone door, separating Long Fei Yi and the rest from Zhang Yixie and Han Yunxi. The strange thing was, compared to the people in the secret room, Zhang Yixie and Han Yunxi's position was more obvious and easier to attack. But the rats completely ignored them. They were restless in front of the secret room's large stone door. They wanted to enter but didn't dare to. Everyone felt that it was strange. But at this moment, no one had the time to think about the reason. With the flesh-eating rats blocking the door, Long Fei Yi and the rest were completely blocked. Long Fei Yi's prepared whip could have saved Han Yunxi in one move. But at this moment, he was completely unable to lash it out. He didn't lash out with his whip. With a stomach full of anger, his expression was so gloomy that it was terrifying. Zhang Yixie, of course, also noticed the strange behavior of the flesh-eating rats. He didn't understand why it was like this. But he held tightly onto Han Yunxi and didn't dare to move recklessly. At this moment, another group of flesh-eating rats had caught up from behind. What was even more unexpected was that this group of flesh-eating rats which were originally chasing Zhang Yixie actually passed by Zhang Yixie and Han Yunxi and blocked the entrance of the secret room together with another group of flesh-eating rats. What's the meaning of this? Don't tell me they're coming for us. Ji Yu, who always liked to laugh, was irritated. Tang Li was also angry and punched the wall. Mu Ling-er and Duanmu Yarrow stood at the side silently, each with their own thoughts. Long Fei Yi's handsome brows were tightly knitted. He didn't say a word and just stared at Han Yunxi. After so long, he finally noticed that this woman's gaze was as calm as still water. In this situation, with her ability, how could she allow Zhang Yixie to threaten her? At this moment, with her personality, how could she be so quiet? But up until now, she hadn't made a move. In the past, when she looked at him, she would be foolishly infatuated, she would blush coquettishly, she would glare angrily, and she would also avoid him in fear. That kind of true personality, she didn't hide it, didn't pretend. It had never been like this before. Her gaze was so desperate, as if she had given up on everything, including him. Long Fei Yi couldn't care less about the flesh-eating rats. An inexplicable sense of fear suddenly attacked his heart. This was the first time in his life that he felt fear. What's wrong with this woman? Is she feeling unwell somewhere? Zhang Yixie, let go of her. Long Fei Yi's sudden roar gave everyone a fright. They'd never seen this man lose all reason before. This roar immediately alarmed the flesh-eating rats at the door. One by one, they all arched their backs and scratched their claws restlessly. Seeing this, Zhang Yixie's lips curled into a cold sneer. Sure. As he spoke, he really let go of Han Yunxi's neck. But at the same time, he very impudently hugged Han Yunxi's waist. Zhang Yixie. Long Fei Yi gritted his teeth and clenched his fists so tightly that his knuckles cracked. In the silent secret room, it was especially clear. Zhang Yixie swept a glance at the flesh-eating rats on the floor and sneered. Long Fei Yi, I hope we can still. Goodbye. As he spoke, he hugged Han Yunxi tightly and turned to leave. Zhang Yixie, this prince will make you regret it. Long Fei Yi angrily shouted. He was just a little bit away from shouting for Han Yunxi. But in the end, he didn't do it. Zhang Yixie's shoulder was injured. Why didn't this woman resist? She clearly had hidden weapons all over her body and her pockets were filled with poison. Zhang Yixie's haughty back gradually faded into the distance until it disappeared into the secret passage. Meanwhile, the flesh-eating rats remained by the entrance, showing no signs of dispersing. Heaven knows when they'd give up and scatter like before. Strange. The white-clothed man muttered to himself. The flesh-eating rats were summoned by the poisonous beast to deal with intruders. There was the poisonous beast's scent in the secret room. The flesh-eating rats were instinctively afraid and didn't dare to enter. As for why the flesh-eating rats didn't attack Han Yunxi and Zhang Yixie, he also couldn't figure it out. Just now at the Xian Gold door, the flesh-eating rats still wanted to attack Han Yunxi. And Zhang Yixie was also being chased very miserably, wasn't he? Why did they suddenly stop attacking? Where's the poisonous beast? The white-clothed man glanced at the secret room again. He was full of confusion, but he didn't have time to investigate further. He took a deep breath, clutched his chest, and hurriedly chased after Zhang Yixie. Chapter 259. It was unknown when the flesh-eating rats that had surrounded the entrance of the secret room had dispersed. In short, Zhang Yixie hugged Han Yunxi the entire way, and there were no pursuers. Zhang Yixie had directly slid into the poisonous beast's secret room because he had triggered Qiankeng's Achilles heel. The path that he had come from had not been sealed by the collapsed rocks. He followed the path that he had come from and quickly flew out of the cast cave, towards Qiankeng's entrance. The map had been stolen, and Qiankeng's Achilles heel had been triggered. The medical academy's guards had tightly surrounded Qiankeng. It would not be easy to escape from everyone's eyes. However, with Zhang Yixie's ability, it was still possible for him to break out of the encirclement. He hugged Han Yunxi tightly with one hand, and pulled up his mask with the other. Just as he was about to leave, Han Yunxi, who had been very quiet the entire way, suddenly opened her mouth. Her voice was as cold as ice. Zhang Yixie, if you expose my identity, I will definitely let everyone in Northern Li country know that His Highness Duke Kang is the 100 Poisons sect master. There were guards all around Qiankeng. Zhang Yixie had put on his own mask, but he had forgotten about her. Zhang Yixie's hand seemed to be gently hugging her, but he was actually using a lot of strength. If Han Yunxi struggled, her waist would definitely break. It was not strange that Han Yunxi did not struggle. However, this sharp-tongued woman had been silent the entire way, which was not normal. Zhang Yixie had been on guard for a long time, but he did not expect Han Yunxi to warn him like this the moment she opened her mouth. He sneered disdainfully, Han Yunxi, don't forget that you are now in my hands. Han Yunxi was still expressionless. His Highness Duke Kang, don't forget that only I can cure the poison in your shoulder. This time, no one had seen the poisonous beast. In other words, Zhang Yixie did not use the poisonous beast's blood to cure the poison. The poison in his shoulder could only be cured by Han Yunxi. Upon hearing Han Yunxi's words, Zhang Yixie laughed loudly. What, you are in this prince's hands, and you still don't plan to give me the antidote. I really don't have any plans, Han Yunshi replied fearlessly. Zhang Yixie was not angry. He just chuckled, and then suddenly pressed Han Yunshi's head into his arms, hugged her tightly, and soared into the sky. This time, Han Yunshi struggled. However, the more her head moved, the tighter Zhang Yixie's big hands pressed down. Her whole face was pressed tightly against his chest, and even breathing was difficult. One of her hands was pressed tightly against his body, while the other was wrapped around her waist. She couldn't move at all. Bastard! Han Yunshi cursed in her heart. Was she too kind, so everyone bullied her? Did he really think that she was a sick cat if she didn't show her might? At this time, Zhang Yixie had already rushed to the top of the crater with her in his arms. The moment the medical guards saw them, the archers immediately lined up and shot thousands of arrows. Zhang Yixie ran and dodged at the same time. He was highly focused. Unexpectedly, at this time, Han Yunshi suddenly opened her mouth and fiercely bit down on his chest. Biting, a woman's most powerful martial art. In the past, she was able to bite Long Fei Yi in pain. Of course, compared to that time at Long Fei Yi, Han Yunshi didn't use any poison this time. The poison on Zhang Yixie's shoulder was her biggest bargaining chip. She had a lot of poisons, but she never wasted them. Zhang Yixie never thought that Han Yunshi would bite him. He subconsciously looked down, and at this time, a sharp arrow flew towards him. Zhang Yixie hurriedly turned his head to avoid it and was almost hit. Damn it! This woman did it on purpose. She chose to bite him when he couldn't be distracted. Zhang Yixie had no choice but to let go. Han Yunshi, do you believe that this prince won't throw you back? Han Yunshi then loosened her bite and said indifferently, up to you. If you don't want to live. If she died, who would help him cure the poison? He was the dignified 100 Poisons sect leader, a formidable person in the poison world. Yet he still didn't know what kind of poison was in his shoulder and how long it would take for the poison to take effect. If this matter were to spread, how would he be able to establish himself in the poison world? Zhang Yixie was furious. He had kidnapped this woman several times and finally succeeded this time. However, he didn't feel any sense of accomplishment. Instead, he vomited to death. Zhang Yixie chose to remain silent and stopped fighting with Han Yunshi. He concentrated on dealing with the arrows coming from all directions. But who knew that Han Yunshi, who was in an extremely bad mood, had nowhere to vent her anger. She didn't intend to let him off. Taking advantage of Zhang Yixie's release, Han Yunshi suddenly reached out to grab his injured shoulder. Others didn't know that the wound on Zhang Yixie's shoulder had yet to heal, but Han Yunshi was very clear about it. Furthermore, she knew that the only way to make the wound hurt was to scratch it hard. Han Yunshi. Zhang Yixie roared in pain. When Han Yunshi was in a bad mood, she wasn't afraid of anything. She didn't answer but used even more strength. Zhang Yixie couldn't take it anymore and tied her hands again. Han Yunshi struggled violently. Zhang Yixie dodged the arrows while dealing with Han Yunshi's disturbance. Not long after, his other shoulder was hit by 2 arrows. At this time, the medical school's guards chased after them with their qinggong. Han Yunshi, that's enough. Zhang Yixie gritted his teeth, but there was nothing he could do. He could only let her scratch him while he focused on dealing with the medical school's guards. When Zhang Yixie dodged the arrows with Han Yunshi and escaped into the surrounding forest with the help of the medical school's guards, his shoulders were already dripping with blood. As soon as he landed, he threw Han Yunshi away ruthlessly. He didn't have any tender feelings for the fairer sex. How could there be a woman in the world who could torment Northern Li's Kang Wang like this? Han Yunshi fell to the ground and it hurt a lot. However, no matter how painful it was, it couldn't compare to the pain in her heart. She didn't even frown. She sat up and looked at Zhang Yixie coldly. Zhang Yixie was treating his wounds. When he saw Han Yunshi staring at him, his anger rose. He immediately kicked up a pile of soil and threw it at Han Yunshi's face. Bitch! This wasn't the first time that this woman had touched his bottom line. Han Yunshi turned her face away, but she was still hit by the soil. However, she didn't mind Zhang Yixie's behavior. A man who repeatedly kidnapped and threatened women. How could she expect him to have tender feelings for the fairer sex? How could she expect him to negotiate with her nicely? Han Yunxi wiped her face a few times. She still looked at Zhang Yixie coldly without saying a word. Seeing her expression, Zhang Yixie looked at her warily as he treated his wounds. He was afraid that she would sneak up on him again. Although he didn't want to admit it, he really didn't know what to do with this woman. This time, Han Yunxi didn't move. She just looked at him. Her gaze gradually became a little dull, as if she was in a daze. There seemed to be something wrong with this woman, but he couldn't tell what was wrong with her. After treating his wounds, Zhang Yixie forced himself in front of Han Yunxi. He stretched out his hand in front of her and said cold, "The antidote. Long Tianmo's antidote." Han Yunxi also stretched out her hand. Looking at the sky, it would be dark in a few hours. It was time for the appointment with Third Elder. If she couldn't find the poison beast, what could she use to save Long Tianmo? What could she use to win against Third Elder? What could she use to clear her and Jiyu Beiyue's name of injustice? She could escape from Tianing country. Actually, she didn't want to stay any longer. But she couldn't let the name Han Yunxi tarnish in the medical world. She also couldn't bear the burden of a murder case for the rest of her life. She was a doctor. In her career, she'd never failed. She couldn't accept this. "I already said that there's no antidote," Zhang Yixie said angrily. "Then what right do you have to ask me for the antidote?" Han Yunxi cold retorted. Zhang Yixie abruptly lifted Han Yunxi's chin and squeezed it tightly. "You don't have the right to talk terms with this prince." "I'm not talking terms with you. I'm just saying that you don't have the right to ask me for the antidote," Han Yunxi disdained to retort. At these words, Zhang Yixie was so angry that the veins on his forehead were about to pop out. He tightened his grip, almost crushing Han Yunxi's chin. "Han Yunxi, don't think that this prince won't dare to kill you just because you can't cure the poison. If worse comes to worst, this prince can just give up on this shoulder." Although he didn't know what the poison on his shoulder was, he was very clear that the poison was only there and hadn't spread. "I'm guessing that you can't bear to." As expected, Han Yunxi had the ability to anger people to death. Actually, she didn't mean to provoke Zhang Yixie. She was just casually replying. Right now, her heart was very stuffy and chaotic. She only had one firm thought, and that was that she didn't want to return to Tianing. She didn't want to see a certain person. She didn't take Zhang Yixie's matter to heart at all. She was conflicted about where she should go from here. "Long Fei Yi, you don't have to like me, but you can't treat another woman well when you're treating me well." Han Yunxi was absent-minded, but Zhang Yixie was furious. "Han Yunxi, this prince won't kill you, but this prince wants you to live a life worse than death." As Zhang Yixie spoke, he suddenly tore open Han Yunxi's collar. Only then did Han Yunxi completely recover from her thoughts. She quickly pressed down on his hand and said angrily, "Zhang Yixie, have some sense of propriety." "Propriety?" Zhang Yixie gave a cold smile. With a sudden tug, he tore Han Yunxi's outer clothes apart. Han Yunxi cried out in alarm and began to struggle violently. "Zhang Yixie, you're shameless. You're not a man. Whether this prince is a man or not, you'll find out very soon." Zhang Yixie's eyes turned red from anger. He didn't intend to violate Han Yunxi, he just wanted to scare her and let her know what fear was. But who knew that when he saw Han Yunxi's primitive fear, he couldn't stop himself. So this woman who didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth also knew fear. Would she submit to him if he truly had her? With this thought, Zhang Yixie's large hand began to move downwards. Scram! Han Yunxi was scared out of her wits. She never thought that Zhang Yixie would be so shameless. She was so scared that she forgot that she had hidden weapons and poisons. Right at this moment, a white figure appeared out of thin air. It was none other than that masked man in white. At this moment, his mask was completely dyed red. He almost fell down the moment he landed and couldn't even stand properly. It was as if he had been seriously ill and his body was very weak. However, he still rushed over and grabbed Zhang Yixie's shoulder, pulling him away fiercely. He immediately took off his outer clothes to cover Han Yunxi. He clearly couldn't hold on any longer and would fall down with a gust of wind. However, when he turned around and saw Zhang Yixie, his eyes shot out a monstrous killing intent that pierced straight into one's heart. Zhang Yixie, unless I die, don't even think of touching a single hair on her. Chapter 260. The man in white was clearly about to collapse, but his gaze was as firm as a boulder. The strength emanating from his frail body was enough to intimidate people. Seeing the determination in the man in white's eyes, he couldn't help but suspect, could it be that Lady Tianxin is a member of the Western Qin imperial family? Zhang Yixie had naturally investigated Han Yunxi. This woman had no secrets in the Han family. If there was, then it could only come from her mother, Lady Tianxin. Before you help me find the poison beast, she must live, the man in white replied coldly without hesitation. Hihi, so you're here for the poison beast as well. Zhang Yixie had originally thought so. Hearing the man in white's firm reply, he no longer had any doubts. He would rather believe the man in white's words than believe that there was still a descendant of the Western Qin imperial family. One had to know that his grandfather had personally witnessed the death of the last descendant of the Western Qin imperial family, a baby boy in swaddling clothes, under 10,000 arrows. According to the Shadow Clan's rules, once the Western Qin imperial family was annihilated, the Shadow Clan would follow suit. However, Zhang Yixie wasn't curious about the man in white's existence. In his opinion, everyone was selfish and afraid of death. No one would truly be willing to die for someone else. He didn't believe that after the last descendant of the Western Qin imperial family was annihilated, everyone in the Shadow Clan would follow the imperial family. No matter what, there would definitely be deserters. After clarifying, Zhang Yixie no longer held back, get out of the way. For the sake of the Shadow Clan, I won't make things difficult for you. Zhang Yixie could obviously see that the man in white was seriously injured. Moreover, it was an internal injury. He wasn't a match for him at all. I've said it before. Over my dead body. The man in white's voice was frighteningly cold, causing fear to rise in people's hearts. The arrogant Zhang Yixie's eyes flashed with vigilance. He didn't dare to be careless. He whistled and summoned several black-clothed poison men who were lying in ambush, refusing a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. Men, capture him alive. Zhang Yixie retreated to the side. Of course, he wanted to keep this man alive. Although he didn't like this white-clothed man, he was still looking forward to subduing the Shadow Clan and helping him in his grand plans. Under normal circumstances, the white-robed man would have been able to easily deal with a few mere poison men in one move. However, at this moment, his inner power was almost completely depleted. Forget about the poison men, anyone with even the slightest bit of martial arts would be able to defeat him. He took a few steps back and looked back at Han Yunxi. Han Yunxi had long been scared out of her wits. She wrapped the blood-stained white robe tightly around her body and curled up into a ball, shivering. Her clear eyes were filled with fear. At this moment, she was on guard against the entire world, including the man in white. The man in white seemed to want to say something to her, but when he saw how guarded she was, he turned back. An indescribable heartache flashed across his eyes and he resolutely released the hand that had been pressed over his heart to clench a small golden throwing dagger tightly. Before they even started fighting, fresh blood began to slowly flow from the corners of his mouth, dripping onto his chest. Seeing that, not to mention Zhang Yixie, even the few poison men who had surrounded him began to laugh coldly. With him in such a state, was there even a need to fight? The few poison men exchanged glances and the others remained where they were, watching from the sidelines while one of them stepped forward. This man didn't even have the intention to fight and it looked like he wanted to capture the white-robed man directly. To think that he would look down on this man to such an extent. Anger flashed in the white-robed man's eyes and he suddenly struck out with his dagger. No one had thought that his small throwing dagger would be so powerful. It was fast, vicious and extremely accurate, striking right between the poison man's brows. It was too unexpected. With that, the other poison men were all on guard. Be careful. Attack together. 5 to 6 poison men came from different directions, wielding long swords in their hands as they surrounded and attacked. Just in time. The white-robed man did not even lose out in terms of his aura as he mustered up all his strength to speak loudly, each word resounding. Saying that, he clenched his jaw tightly and wielded the throwing dagger with both hands. He sent flying dagger after dagger flying out, his speed and strength unexpectedly terrifying, and the poison men were unable to dodge at all. 6 daggers, not a single one of them missed. Moreover, every single one of the daggers struck right between the brows, one of them even piercing through the poison man's hand that was shielding his forehead before stabbing right in between his brows. The poison men fell one after another, completely wiped out. After the last poison man fell, the white-robed man finally could not hold on any longer. His hand that was in the air hurriedly clutched at his chest, but it was already too late. He staggered a few steps and almost fell down, a large mouthful of blood spurting out from his mouth, drenching his face mask so much that blood was dripping onto his chest. However, even if that was the case, he could not care about himself, as the first thing he did was to turn back to look at Han Yunxi, to make sure that she was still there, to make sure that her condition had not worsened, to make sure that she was not crying. A glint of admiration flashed past Zhang Yixie's eyes as he thought to himself, although this fella looked frail and weak, but he was a real man. Admiration was admiration, but Zhang Yixie did not have the heart to cherish a talent. He could tell that the white-robed man had used up all his strength, and him at this moment was completely without the strength to even truss up a chicken. Zhang Yixie placed his hands behind his back as he walked over step by step. The white-robed man immediately retreated. Although he was still holding onto the little golden dagger in one hand, he knew that he would not be able to throw it out. He could only retreat, retreating to Han Yunxi's side to protect her. Han Yunxi stared at them in a daze, not moving an inch, but her entire body was trembling. She was not an omnipotent and fearless god. She was a human, and a woman at that. Of course she would be afraid. She was so scared that she was in a daze, not knowing what to do. The white-robed man crouched down by her side, causing her to curl up even tighter as she looked at him with a guarded expression. But suddenly, Zhang Yixie flew over and kicked the white-robed man. Caught off guard, the white-robed man was sent tumbling to the ground. As soon as she saw Zhang Yixie approach, Han Yunxi gave a shrill cry that filled the entire forest. "Miss Yunxi, don't be afraid," the white-robed man shouted. He dragged his tired and weak body to his feet and stood in front of Han Yunxi to protect her. At the same time, Zhang Yixie landed in front of the white-robed man, less than a step away. Zhang Yixie ignored Han Yunxi for now. His lips curved into a frivolous and arrogant smile. "Your lordship will give you one last chance." Scram. The white-robed man didn't reply, but stared at Zhang Yixie with a cold gaze, unwilling to yield. Very good. Zhang Yixie wasn't so patient. He simply raised his foot and viciously kicked at the white-robed man's heart, the most fatal part of his body. This kick sent the white-robed man toppling backwards towards Han Yunxi. Han Yunxi hastily dodged out of the way as she stared blankly at them, unable to regain her senses. The white-robed man had no strength left to rise as large mouthfuls of blood flowed from his face mask. His eyes were about to lose focus, but even so, he made a final effort. He looked towards Han Yunxi, his voice as thin as a mosquito. "Miss Yunxi, go quickly." Han Yunxi didn't move, but stared blankly, and stared. Zhang Yixie had long forgotten about the frightened Han Yunxi. His foot was still on the white-robed man's heart as he asked, "It's already like this. If I don't kill you, won't I become an enemy of the entire Shadow Clan?" This white-robed man's shadow arts were out of the ordinary, so he had to be an outstanding member of the Shadow Clan. Zhang Yixie didn't know how many members of the Shadow Clan were still alive, but he wasn't stupid enough to offend them. The only way to avoid offending them was to silence them. He didn't hesitate to raise his foot, his eyes cold as he viciously stomped down. But right at this moment, Han Yunxi suddenly cried out in alarm, "Don't." Before she finished speaking, multiple poison needles flew over and sank into Zhang Yixie's leg. Zhang Yixie didn't expect this at all, so his legs gave out and he could only retreat. While he was retreating, Han Yunxi shot out more needles. She finally recovered her senses and woke up from her terror. "Zhang Yixie, I, Han Yunxi, will never be able to coexist with you in this lifetime," she angrily shouted. The moment she stood up, she continuously shot pear blossom teardrop rain needles at Zhang Yixie. Although the unguarded Zhang Yixie was hit by a few needles at the beginning, they weren't fatal and the poison couldn't stump him. After all, the difference in their strength was too great. Very quickly, Zhang Yixie detoxified himself while dodging Han Yunxi's poison needles. He had investigated very clearly. This woman's most powerful skill was pear blossom teardrop rain. She didn't know any martial arts, so even if she had poison, it would be difficult for her to use it. After Zhang Yixie detoxified himself, he immediately counterattacked. Without a doubt, once he counterattacked, Han Yunxi couldn't hold on any longer. She attacked too fiercely and the poison needles in her pear blossom teardrop rain were almost used up. Finally, the poison needles were used up and Zhang Yixie walked in front of her. Han Yunxi was actually still in a panic. As soon as she closed the distance between her and Zhang Yixie, she subconsciously retreated and accidentally fell to the ground. Zhang Yixie squatted down with interest, the corners of his mouth held an impudent smile. Hand over the antidote. Han Yunxi was very unwilling. Moreover, she knew that once Zhang Yixie got the antidote, he would be even more unwilling to let her go. However, she had no other choice. There was no way out. She took a deep breath to calm herself down. I didn't bring the antidote with me. It's in the medical school. I'll go back to get it. Zhang Yixie immediately laughed. Han Yunxi, do you think this prince is a 3-year-old child? If there's no antidote, then there should be a prescription, right? There was really no other way. There is. Han Yunxi was about to speak when Zhang Yixie suddenly grabbed her hand. It won't be too late to talk about it after we return to Northern Li. He hadn't suspected anything before, but now that the white-robed man was protecting Han Yunxi, he'd be an idiot if he didn't suspect anything. It was very possible that Han Yunxi was related to Western Qin's imperial clan. If she was, then all the more he wanted to take her away. You beast. Han Yunxi struggled with all her might, but Zhang Yixie's grip tightened. At this moment, the nearly unconscious white-robed man grabbed a throwing knife and stabbed it viciously into Zhang Yixie's back. Yunxi, go. Go. The white-robed man was already out of strength, so how deep could he stab? Zhang Yixie suddenly shook as a powerful force erupted from his back and sent the white-robed man flying backwards until he landed heavily on the ground. Zhang Yixie didn't even look back as he pulled Han Yunxi into his arms. At this moment, Zhang Yixie suddenly felt a burst of pain in his shoulder. He turned to look and saw a fiery red squirrel about the size of a palm. It had somehow landed on his shoulder, its 2 front teeth nibbling at his shoulder. Note to the reader, today's update is 1, so tomorrow's 3. Chapter 261. Compared to other squirrels, the squirrel on Zhang Yixie's shoulder was smaller. It was about the size of a palm and chubby, like a round ball. Its most unique feature was its soft fur, so white that it was spotless. Most squirrels were timid creatures, but this white squirrel was very brave. When it sensed Zhang Yixie's gaze, it didn't even look him in the eye, much less dodge his gaze. It only glanced at him out of the corner of its eye before continuing to focus on nibbling away with relish. No matter how unique it was still a small animal, but Zhang Yixie actually felt like he was being looked down upon. Of course, his attention was on Han Yunxi, so he didn't pay it much mind. After all, this was the poison sect's Lotus Mountain, so there were many strange animals and plants. Zhang Yixie was about to brush the white squirrel away, but that immediately angered it. It swiped its claws at Zhang Yixie's hand with lightning speed. Zhang Yixie didn't expect this. Not only did he fail to brush the white squirrel away, 3 long bloody gashes appeared on the back of his hand. It was a ghastly sight. The white squirrel straightened its body, its 2 stubby paws curled up in front of its chest. All of its fur was standing on end, making it look like a hedgehog. It grinned as it glared at Zhang Yixie. It was a little foodie and loved to eat poisonous things. The thing it hated the most was being disturbed when it was enjoying a good meal. Although it was angry, it couldn't resist the temptation of delicious food. The poison on this fellow's shoulder was too delicious. It wanted nothing more than to rip off his shoulder and drag it back to its nest to slowly chew on it. When the white squirrel saw that Zhang Yixie didn't move, it assumed that he was intimidated by its powerful aura. Thus, it quickly pounced back to the wound on his shoulder. It wasn't poisoned, but it actually liked to eat poison. A hint of suspicion flashed across Zhang Yixie's eyes. He carefully reached out his hand to grab it, but the white squirrel suddenly jumped up and dodged his hand. It bared its fangs and brandished its claws at his face. Zhang Yixie hurriedly struck out. At this moment, Han Yunxi took the opportunity to break free from his restraints and hurriedly ran towards the white-robed man. As for the white squirrel, it landed on Zhang Yixie's head and used both its front and back claws to crazily ravage Zhang Yixie's hair. "Can't you eat some poison properly? You're so irritable." Scram. Zhang Yixie had never been hit above his head before. He was irritated and swung his fists with all his might in an attempt to knock the white squirrel down. Unfortunately, the white squirrel was still dodging while behaving atrociously. It was so agile that Zhang Yixie could not reach it no matter how hard he tried. Han Yunxi was stunned. Where did this monster come from? It was so intelligent. Was it here to save them? Let's go. Hurry. The white-robed man could not hold on any longer. Han Yunxi had no time to worry about that. She quickly helped him to his feet and fled into the forest on the side. Half of Zhang Yixie's attention was on them. Seeing them flee, he ignored the white squirrel and prepared to chase after them. However, the white squirrel was even faster than him. It jumped down from his head and chased after Han Yunxi while squeaking. What was going on? Could it be that it wasn't here to save them? With the white squirrel in front and Zhang Yixie behind, there were two pursuers. Han Yunxi supported the white-robed man and ran with all her might. Unfortunately, she could not run far without her qinggong. Soon, the white squirrel caught up. Han Yunxi stopped abruptly. Just as she was about to use her needle, the white squirrel had already pounced on her aggressively. Han Yunxi subconsciously closed her eyes. To her surprise, the white squirrel did not pounce on her face. Instead, it pounced on her medical bag and squeezed in, leaving its fat butt outside as it squeezed with all its might. This, Han Yunxi could not care less. She grabbed the white squirrel's fat tail and lifted it up. She threw it at the chasing Zhang Yixie and hurriedly continued to flee. Regardless of whether it was here to save them or not, it had to help them stall Zhang Yixie first. Zhang Yixie caught the white squirrel, but the white squirrel jumped up and pounced on his face again. Zhang Yixie dodged again. The white squirrel hurriedly turned around to chase after Han Yunxi. This time, it did not dare to pounce directly. Instead, it climbed up Han Yunxi's leg. Unfortunately, it was still discovered by Han Yunxi. Han Yunxi, who was busy running for her life, did not have the spare time to pay attention to what this little thing was. She only knew that this thing could stall Zhang Yixie. While the white squirrel was squeezing into the medical bag, Han Yunxi repeated the same trick and grabbed its tail again. She did not know if she had used too much force this time, but when she pulled it up, the white squirrel let out a pitiful squeak. Han Yunxi still threw it to Zhang Yixie to buy more time for herself. After repeating this again and again, the white squirrel finally became angry. It was caught by Zhang Yixie for the third time. It was not in a hurry to chase after Han Yunxi. Instead, it sat in Zhang Yixie's palm and stared at Zhang Yixie with its big black eyes. It could not bear to part with the poison on this fellow's shoulder. It had lived for so many years and had never eaten such delicious poison. It was sure that it was a newly concocted poison. However, it wanted to chase after Han Yunxi and company, so it could not be bothered with him. Just as Zhang Yixie's fingers were about to clench, the white squirrel suddenly let out a fierce squeak. The squeak was as a sharp weapon slicing through glass, making one feel very uncomfortable. Before the squeak ended, a group of flesh-eating rats surged out from the grass in all directions and surrounded Zhang Yixie. However, they prostrated themselves in the surroundings and hesitated, not immediately attacking. Zhang Yixie was very surprised. He never expected that the white squirrel would be able to summon flesh-eating rats here. Recalling the calamity in the sinkhole, he became even more suspicious of the white squirrel's origins. His gaze froze as he suddenly clenched his 5 fingers. Unfortunately, the white squirrel instantly dodged his five-fingered mountain and leaped high into the air, landing outside the flesh-eating rats group. The moment the white squirrel left Zhang Yixie, the flesh-eating rats prostrating on the ground immediately arched their backs and pounced over. Zhang Yixie turned and fled. Damn it! Han Yunxi and the white-shirted man were not far away, but he was already powerless. The cooked duck had flown away. This little white squirrel, regardless of whether it was a poisonous beast or not, the next time he saw it, he would definitely suck its blood dry. Zhang Yixie fled with all his might as the flesh-eating rats chased after him crazily. At this moment, Han Yunxi heaved a sigh of relief. However, she did not dare stay any longer. She supported the white-shirted man and headed deep into the forest. She needed to quickly find a place to hide. The white squirrel sat on a tree branch and watched Zhang Yixie's departing figure. Its black eyes were round and filled with reluctance. The delicious poison was gone just like that. It watched for a long time before turning back. The moment it saw Han Yunxi leave, it immediately jumped up with a squeak and chased after her. "New master, don't leave me behind." The white squirrel quickly caught up to Han Yunxi. This time, it had learned its lesson and did not dare to burrow into the medical bag. Instead, it carefully followed behind. Han Yunxi originally wanted to find a more concealed place, but unfortunately, the white-shirted man was too weak to walk. She had to immediately treat him. She supported the white-shirted man and sat down under a large tree, using the thick tree trunk as a cover. The white-shirted man leaned against the tree trunk. He was so weak that his eyes were about to close. But he still held on. His mouth opened, as if he wanted to say something to Han Yunxi. "Don't speak first. Don't worry, I will definitely save you." Han Yunxi was especially serious. No matter who this white-shirted man was or why he came, in short, he had saved her when she was at her most fearful and helpless. She would remember this kindness. "Don't worry, I'm fine." The white-shirted man was already in this state, yet he still told her not to worry. Han Yunxi did not know what to say. As she took his pulse, she reached out to take off his blood-red mask. However, the white-shirted man held her hand. His hand was very similar to Long Fei Yi's. It was cold, with distinct knuckles. It was slender and good-looking, but it was not as rough as Long Fei Yi's. It was as gentle as jade. Han Yunxi mused that he probably doesn't use weapons very often. "Don't look." "Okay." Although he was weak, his voice was still so gentle. And his gaze was several times gentler than his voice. He looked at Han Yunxi as if he was looking at the person in his heart. His gaze was soft, with traces of doting and helplessness. This kind of gaze was intoxicating. It was clearly a request, not a request, but Han Yunxi could not reject it. She could not reject his request, and she could not reject his gaze. Han Yunxi, who had been in a nervous state, unconsciously relaxed. She smiled faintly and said, "You must not be ugly, right? What are you afraid of?" Actually, she just wanted to see his expression. He was a member of the Shadow Clan and was so familiar with the Medical Academy's poison sect. She definitely would not recognize him. "MN, very ugly. Don't look." He nodded as he answered. After nodding twice, he did not raise his head again. He had fainted. His head drooped, and his entire body fell to the side. She thought that he would be able to hold on. "Hey, don't sleep. You must not sleep." Han Yunxi was anxious. In this kind of situation, one really needed to rest, but they would not be able to wake up after falling asleep. Han Yunxi did not care about her mask. She quickly laid the white-shirted man down and unbuttoned his clothes. Based on his pulse, he had overdrawn his inner strength and damaged his vitality. Then, he had been kicked twice by Zhang Yixie and injured his heart meridian. It had to be said that his injuries were very serious. Fortunately, his body was strong. If it was anyone else, they would have died long ago. Han Yunxi knew nothing about inner strength, but she could still use acupuncture to protect his heart meridian and help him recover his vitality. After unbuttoning the white-shirted man's clothes, Han Yunxi hurriedly took out needles from her medical pouch. Unexpectedly, she discovered that the poison in the pouch was all gone, and the sets of golden needles were all messed up. This What was going on? She had opened the medical pouch at the Xian gold door. The things inside had been fine. Just now, the white squirrel had tried to burrow into the pouch, but she had pulled it out in time. Where did all the poison go? Seeing Han Yunxi's anxious expression, the white squirrel, who had been obediently hiding to the side, seemed to think of something. It blinked its large eyes a few times, then lowered its head innocently. The white-shirted man's situation was critical. Han Yunxi couldn't care less for now. She decisively poured out all the messy needles to search for what she needed. A large pile of golden needles were mostly used for detoxification. Usually, there would only be a set of a few needles used for acupuncture. It was really hard to find them all together. Han Yunxi, who was anxious to save the man, became angrier the more she searched. That pale little face became taut, more and more serious, and more terrifying. The little white squirrel raised its head a few times to peek at her and unconsciously tucked its tail between its legs. Suddenly, Han Yunxi became angry. Where are the needles? After being a poison doctor for so many years, what she hated the most was people touching her golden needles. The little white squirrel was shocked and didn't dare to hide anymore. It immediately jumped onto the white-shirted man's body. Chapter 262. Han Yunxi was in a hurry to find the golden needles. When she saw the white squirrel jump onto the white-clothed man's body, she was shocked. Why did this unknown monster chase after him again? What did it want to do? The white squirrel looked at Han Yunxi with a sincere gaze. Its stubby little hands were clasped together, as if it was bowing to her or worshipping her. Its tail was wagging vigorously. This time, Han Yunxi looked at it seriously. This little guy seemed to be very friendly to her. However, she was busy saving people and did not have time to care about what it wanted to do. After confirming that the white squirrel was only using the white-clothed man's body to stand and had no intention of harming him, Han Yunxi hurriedly looked for the golden needles again. The white squirrel looked at the messy golden needles and then looked at the white-clothed man. It suddenly turned around and ran away, disappearing in a flash. Strange. Han Yunxi looked at it and let it be. Han Yunxi continued to look for the golden needles. Fortunately, she quickly adjusted her state of mind, otherwise, she did not know how long it would take. She first protected the white-clothed man's heart meridians, then helped him protect his vital energy. She spent a whole 2 hours before she was done. As a doctor, she always had emergency medicine in her pocket. There were medicines for temporary treatment of external injuries and medicinal pills that could save lives in time. She had a heart protection pill that she had kept for a long time. She was reluctant to use it, but now she took it out without hesitation. However, when she took it out, Han Yunxi hesitated. Should she feed it to him? If she fed him, she would have to remove his mask. Looking at the white-clothed man's calm eyebrows and blood-red mask, Han Yunxi's heart sank into a war between heaven and man. Don't look, okay? Yes, it's very ugly. Don't look. These were the last words he said before he fainted. His voice was so gentle that when Han Yunxi thought about it, she could not harden her heart to reject him. Hey, you're definitely not ugly. She did not know why she was so sure. She placed the heart protection pill in his palm and held his hand tightly. Since there was no way to feed him medicine, he could only perform acupuncture a few more times. Han Yunxi tied the man's belt, took off her coat, and put it on him. Anyway, she didn't care so much anymore. From now on, she refused to abide by the so-called women's virtues of this era. As soon as the clothes were taken off, Han Yunxi realized that the clothes wrapped around her body were not hers, but were given to her by the man in white. She gently opened it and found that the clothes were as white as snow. There were no patterns on it, only a few bloodstains. It was like a plum blossom in the snow, cold and lonely. His words were like a person's, his clothes were like a person's. Other than being gentle, what kind of man was he? Han Yunxi had flipped through Cloud Realm Continent's history books when she was bored, so she naturally knew about the Great Qin Empire. The Great Qin Empire had 2 imperial clans and 7 noble clans. Of the 7 noble clans, the Shadow Clan was the most powerful, most loyal to the imperial clan, and also the most low-key. Just like their name, they were like shadows, always standing on the other side of the light, guarding their master and never showing themselves. Han Yunshi covered the white-robed man with his clothes and sat cross-legged by his side, muttering, "Hey, why did you save me?" Back in the sky pit, Long Fei Yi and the rest had recognized him as a member of the Shadow Clan. She didn't think too much about it, but now that this man had risked his life to save her, she couldn't help but think about it. Western Qin's imperial family? Did it have anything to do with her? No, how could it have anything to do with her? She came from the future and simply had the body of the Han family's first wife. More accurately speaking, it should have something to do with Lady Tianxin or her mysterious father. Thinking up to here, Han Yunshi's lips curved into a happy smile. She'd stirred up a lot of trouble in the medical academy, but at least she'd gained something by meeting this man. When he woke up, she had to ask him clearly. Despite her happiness, Han Yunshi still couldn't recover her mood. She glanced at the sky, her eyes filled with helplessness. The sky would be dark in another 2 hours, and it was getting closer to midnight. It seemed like she wouldn't be able to rush back to the medical academy. Actually, even if she did, she wouldn't be able to save Long Tianmo. There wasn't even a shadow of the poisonous beast. Who knew if it was hidden or just a rumor? What was the point of going back? Facing doubts, ridicule, and expulsion? This was the first time Han Yunshi felt so powerless. She rubbed her forehead, too lazy to think too much about it. She wasn't someone who was afraid of trouble. Once she was sure that the white-robed man was fine, she would go back and settle this. Suddenly, there was a rustling sound from the side. Han Yunshi immediately turned around, her body on guard. Unexpectedly, it was the little squirrel that had returned, dragging a huge pile of things back. Han Yunshi focused and gaped. Wasn't this white squirrel a little too smart? How long had it lived for? Could it be that it had gained sentience? She saw the little squirrel using a huge banana leaf as a base and putting all kinds of poisonous herbs on top. Then, it bit the banana leaf's head and dragged it over with all its might. Han Yunshi glanced at it and basically analyzed all the poisons on it. She had half of them in her medical bag, and the other half were very rare types. Under Han Yunshi's gaze, the little squirrel dragged all the poisonous herbs to Han Yunshi's side and wagged its tail at Han Yunshi to express its goodwill. Han Yunshi, who had calmed down for a long time, finally began to seriously examine the little squirrel. If she didn't see wrongly, it seemed to be gnawing on Zhang Yixie's shoulder. That shoulder was poisonous. However, it wasn't poisoned. The huge pile of poisonous herbs in front of her was all found by it. Could it be that it could identify poisons? Han Yunshi suddenly thought of something and was so frightened that she immediately protected the white-robed man and retreated. This little thing couldn't be the poisonous beast Jiyu Shu, right? Although it was very, very small, so small that it could be squashed to death with a palm, Han Yunshi couldn't help but be suspicious when she saw the various poisonous herbs it had dragged over. The poison sect's poisonous beast Jiyu Shu could identify and consume hundreds of poisons. Moreover, its blood could cure hundreds of poisons. The most terrifying thing was that the poisonous beast itself was highly toxic. Once bitten, it was equivalent to being poisoned by hundreds of poisons. Even an immortal wouldn't be able to save you. Based on the current situation, this little thing had at least 2 of them. If she was bitten, she would be consigned to eternal damnation. Seeing Han Yunshi's fear, the little squirrel became anxious and wagged its tail even more vigorously. It kept cupping its hands and looking as cute as it could get. However, Han Yunshi looked on warily, not quite believing it. How could a poisonous beast be so cute? Wouldn't it be an insult to the word beast? No matter how the little squirrel expressed its goodwill, it was useless. It was even more nervous than Han Yunshi and jumped around on the spot. After a while, it plunged its head into the poisonous herbs and kept picking with its claws. Millimeter, its new master was angry. It had to return all the poisons it had accidentally eaten. It couldn't make its master angry. It had slept in the secret room for a long time. When it woke up, it discovered that someone had intruded and immediately summoned the flesh-eating rats. Although it was chained up with many black iron shackles, it could shrink and enter the secret room as it pleased. No one but its old master knew this secret. Actually, it wasn't locked up. It was just too lazy to come out and let the medical academy's people drug it. Moreover, the poison sect was its home. Why would it leave? It hadn't expected this woman's blood to open the Xian gold door. She must be its new master. It had been hiding in the shadows, spying on Zhang Yixie and the others. As soon as it smelled a familiar scent, it immediately found her and burrowed into her medical pouch to hide. This was also why the Jiu Shu didn't dare approach her. As soon as it burrowed into the pouch, it discovered a lot of delicious food. It had only planned to eat a few mouthfuls to allay its hunger since there were plenty of poisons outside. But who knew that it couldn't stop eating? Fine, it admitted that it would often eat until it forgot itself when it came across delicious food. It had no idea what was going on around it. When it finally finished eating, it crawled up and saw its new master being pulled into the bad man's arms. It had planned to bite him to death, but as soon as it jumped onto his shoulder, it discovered a whole new world. It was a new kind of poison that it hadn't smelled before. It was a completely new kind of poison. And so, it almost forgot about itself again. The little squirrel fervently picked through the poisons. Han Yunxi was afraid, but also curious. She looked carefully and discovered that the little squirrel was picking up poisons that had been missing from her medical pouch. Could it be? Han Yunxi still hadn't figured it out when the little squirrel picked out a large pile of medicinal herbs and placed them in front of Han Yunxi. Afraid that Han Yunxi wouldn't understand, the little squirrel picked up a poisonous herb and burrowed into her medical pouch. Han Yunxi instantly understood and slapped the medical pouch with her palm. So it was you who messed up my acupuncture needles, she cried angrily. It didn't matter if the poison was eaten, but she hated having her gold needles messed up and dirty. Squeak squeak, the little squirrel actually didn't resist. It curled up into a ball and let out an aggrieved sound. Han Yunxi hurriedly removed her hand, and the little squirrel immediately jumped out and landed on her arm. It hugged its arms in front of its chest and looked like it was begging for forgiveness. Han Yunxi forgot to be afraid. She was angry and amused at the same time. She was defeated by this cute little thing. She carefully reached out and scratched its little face. Not only did the little squirrel not reject it, it even raised its head and continued to act cute. Han Yunxi was amused. You are the Jiu Shu? She didn't know if the little squirrel could understand Han Yunxi's words. It was still pitiful a second ago, but the next second, it immediately grinned at Han Yunxi. Han Yunxi didn't know if it understood, nor did she know what it meant by smiling like that. She could only stare at it suspiciously. When the little squirrel saw her expression, it squeaked a few times and jumped back to the ground. It held its breath and puffed up its cheeks. In an instant, its small body disappeared and was replaced by a huge creature. It was a white squirrel the size of a lion or tiger. Its 4 claws were especially short and fat. It was so clumsy that it couldn't even stand up after sitting on the ground. No matter from which direction, it looked like a huge white furball. Han Yunxi was stunned. How could this be? The little squirrel's appearance was an insult to the word beast, but its clumsy appearance was even more insulting to the word beast. God knows how long it had been since it moved. The Jiu Shu didn't like its clumsy appearance at all. It quickly returned to its original form and jumped back onto Han Yunxi's arm, continuing to grin at her. This time, its new owner should know its identity, right? Of course she knew. There was no doubt that it was the Jiu Shu. Han Yunxi didn't know why this little thing stuck to her and treated her well. Anyway, she didn't reject it. She squinted her eyes and smiled. She leaned closer. Little thing, do you mind letting me use some of your blood? The Jiu Shu's blood could cure hundreds of poisons. It didn't take much effort to obtain it. Long Tianmo could be saved. Note to the reader, I'm not in good condition today. I'll have to push back the 3rd update to you tomorrow. Chapter 263. Seeing Han Yunxi smile with her eyes squinted, the little squirrel finally heaved a sigh of relief. It thought that since its new owner was smiling, it must mean that she had forgiven it. Hence, It also went over and smiled even more brilliantly. Its 2 front teeth were faintly discernible. Han Yunxi stared at its front teeth and thought that the blood of a poisonous beast could cure hundreds of poisons, but if one was bitten by it, one would be poisoned to death. What was the reason for this contradiction? If its blood could cure hundreds of poisons, then its blood must not be poisonous. Could it be that this little thing was like a poisonous snake, hiding a venom gland under its teeth, and when it bites, venom would shoot out from the tip of its teeth? What kind of poison was its venom? Anyway, it must be something that her detoxification system had not recorded, so she was unable to detect its existence. In modern history, this little monster had never appeared before. She had to think of a way to obtain its venom to study. But the most important thing now was to obtain its blood. Warm blood that could save one's life. Han Yunxi smiled as she took out a small porcelain bottle. A porcelain bottle to store medicine? Could it be that its new owner wanted to give it something delicious to eat? The little squirrel's inverted triangular nose opened and closed as it sniffed and crawled closer. It was a pity that it could not smell the scent of poison. It stopped in front of Han Yunxi and stared at her curiously. What was in the bottle? Who knew that Han Yunxi's other hand flashed out a small knife? The knife's edge was so bright that it was blinding. The little squirrel was first stunned before it jumped up in fear and hid far away. New owner, what do you want to do? Han Yunxi grinned and chuckled. Little thing, come over here. You have to pay for what you did. The little squirrel was so frightened that it was about to cry. Could it be that its new owner wanted to roast it and eat it? Don't. Seeing that the little squirrel did not move and did not escape, Han Yunxi secretly rejoiced. She used the small knife to cut her hand and collected some blood into the small porcelain bottle to demonstrate to the little squirrel. The little squirrel looked at it seriously and immediately shook its head violently. Well, it was very smart and intelligent. It understood, but it refused. Han Yunxi hesitated for a moment before taking out a poison from her medical bag. Upon seeing this, the squirrel was puzzled. It had long eaten all the poison in the cloth bag, so why was there more now? Where did it come from? Of course, it was taken out from the detoxification system. The medical kit was just a cover. Han Yunxi spread out her fingers, scattering the poison in her palm. The little squirrel sniffed it and suddenly jolted. It stood up in excitement. It was still the same taste and the same formula. This poison was none other than the delicacy on Zhang Yixie's shoulder. The little squirrel didn't hesitate to pounce at her, but Han Yunxi evaded it with a mischievous grin. She took out her dagger again. It's just a small bottle of blood. It won't kill you. Do you want to trade? Han Yunxi knew that the little squirrel would understand, but she didn't know that this little thing would be so unambitious. Not only did it nod without hesitation, it even went into her medical bag and took out a small porcelain bottle. This meant 2 sets of poison in exchange for 2 bottles of blood. Would it be anemic? Han Yunxi couldn't help but laugh. She generously took out 3 sets of poison and threw them to the little squirrel. It looked at the medical bag and then looked at the thing in Han Yunxi's hand. It was too confused. It didn't see anything when it went in. All right, it couldn't care less. It wanted to eat, and eat. The little squirrel swept up all the poison in an instant, afraid that Han Yunxi would go back on her word. Of course, after eating it all, it still took out a 3rd porcelain bottle. After eating 3 sets of poison, it had to return 3 bottles of blood. Han Yunxi laughed as she shook her head. She grabbed the little squirrel and held it in her hand. She lectured, little thing, 1 bottle is enough. You have to know how to cherish yourself and feel sorry for yourself. Do you remember that? The little squirrel seemed to understand. Its black eyes were sneaky as it timidly glanced at Han Yunxi's knife before immediately retracting its gaze. It only knew fear after eating it. It didn't know where its new owner would cut it. Would it be painful? This was the first time someone had used a knife on it. Seeing the little squirrel like this, Han Yunxi couldn't help but secretly laugh. Of course she wouldn't let it suffer too much. After all, she had used a knife and a needle. However, she would make sure it couldn't run away for now. Han Yunxi chose the little squirrel's leg and stabbed it in the calf. She nimbly poured out a small bottle of blood and immediately treated the wound. Actually, the wound was very small, but she had deliberately bandaged it very exaggeratedly. She wrapped it several times with gauze and sternly told the little squirrel, "Don't move around or you'll be crippled." The little squirrel didn't understand what she was saying. Seeing her so serious, it turned back to look at its leg. Its eyes immediately rolled back and it fainted. Looking at the little squirrel that had fainted in her hand, Han Yunshi didn't know whether to laugh or cry. If the world knew that this was the ferocious poison beast of legend, would they think that the poison sect's poison beast legends were fake? A long time later, when Han Yunshi saw the little squirrel's ferocious side, she would realize that she had underestimated it. Of course, this was a story for another time. Han Yunshi glanced at the sky. It would be midnight in less than an hour. Even with Luo Zuishan taking her the shortcut, it would still take a long time to get to the medical academy. She wouldn't make it in time. But she didn't hesitate at all. She put the little squirrel in her medical pouch, tidied it up, and resolutely picked up the unconscious white-robed man to walk back the way they had come. She wouldn't give up. With the antidote, it meant that Long Tianmo's life could be saved. It meant that her and Jiyu Beiyue's crimes could be washed away. It also meant that she could win the bet against Third Elder and that she wouldn't implicate the Duke of Qin's estate. She wouldn't owe that man anything. No matter what, she couldn't give up. She had to hurry back. Han Yunshi placed the white-robed man's hand on her shoulder. Her thin shoulders forcibly supported the man's weight. Not long after, her straight waist was pressed down. The white-robed man's entire weight sank down. She couldn't straighten her waist even if she wanted to. But she didn't even frown. She couldn't straighten her waist. Even if she bent her waist, she would still persevere. In the beginning, she walked rather quickly, but gradually, her footsteps became heavier. Each step was slower than the previous one, and each step was deeper and deeper. At this speed, she definitely wouldn't make it in time. What should she do? Give up. If she was late, she could still save Long Tianmo. Third Elder's diagnosis was wrong, so there was no way he could save Long Tianmo. But if she was late, it wouldn't count as her victory. So what if she won? She had never been a person who liked to win. Give up. Rest for a night to recover her energy. When the white-robed man woke up, it wouldn't be too late to go back. In any case, Long Tianmo still had a few days left to live. But if she didn't win, it was the same as losing. Not only would the world know that Han Yunshi lost, they would also know that Qin Wangfei didn't keep her word. Qin Wangfei would be blacklisted by the medical academy and would never be allowed to enter again. Thinking of this, Han Yunshi, who was so tired that she was about to collapse, tightly clenched her teeth. She didn't know where the strength came from. Perhaps it was because of the pride in her heart. She, Han Yunshi, would never fail to cure a person's poison. Perhaps it was because she didn't owe him anything and didn't burden him. Long Fei Yi, I will return you a clean title of Qin Wangfei. From now on, everything will be clear and we won't owe each other anything, right? Han Yunshi, who couldn't even walk, tightly held onto the white-robed man's hand. She took another step, each step faster and faster. The night wind was icy cold, but she was already drenched in sweat. Would she make it in time? Time was very tight. By now, the back courtyard of the Medical Academy's consultation hall was packed with people. The three elders of the Council of Elders, Qin Wangrong, Shi Yubo, Luo Zuishan, and many other medical scholars, doctors, and divine doctors had come to watch the show. Most of them didn't know that the poison sect Sky Pit had been destroyed and the poison beasts had gone missing. The higher-ups were swamped with work. It was already midnight, but they were still full of energy, especially Third Elder and Shi Yubo. That was because Jiyu Beiyu had been missing for 2 days, while Han Yunshi had been missing for a day. Long Tianmo, who'd been perfectly fine, was now rolling around in his bed in pain. Everything pointed to the fact that Han Yunshi and Jiyu Beiyu had fled in fear of punishment. Hehe, so Qin Wangfei was a swindler. I don't think she'll come back for a checkup at a time like this. Isn't that so? I thought Tianning's crown prince was really poisoned. I heard she used needles to expel the poison that day and shocked all the elders. I heard she used a set of needles to scare Third Elder. As I see it, those needles were real. As for the poison arts, it's a pity for a talent like Jiyu Beiyu. Why did he hook up with a woman like that instead of being an imperial physician? Shush, you can't talk about things like that. The spectators discussed animatedly as they waited. As soon as they finished speaking, the other side misunderstood. What? Qin Wangfei and imperial physician Ji Yu are having an affair? Really? No wonder Jiyu Beiyu, who's always put his own safety first, would get involved this time. So it turns out. That's where the rumors came from. Seeing that it was almost midnight, the crowd's discussions grew louder and louder. Third Elder, who liked peace and quiet, didn't mind at all. He looked up at the moon in the sky and counted the time with his fingers. After seeing Han Yunshi use needles to expel the poison that day, he felt more and more unreconciled. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that something was amiss. As expected, he'd been fooled by that girl. Han Yunshi definitely wouldn't come tonight. Even if he was sure she wouldn't, he'd still wait until midnight. Otherwise, people might say he was bullying a junior or that he didn't give Tianning's Duke of Qin face. He'd even prepared his medical kit so he could diagnose Long Tianmo's condition in front of everyone tonight. Over the past 3 days, he'd flipped through many medical books and studied many cases, so he had a rough idea of what was going on. At this moment, Lady Lianxin spoke up. Lung. Someone come, push out Tianning's crown prince. As I see it, Qin Wangfei should be here soon. It was almost midnight. Wasn't Lady Lianxin doing this on purpose? As soon as she finished speaking, the crowd roared with laughter. Since it was already so late, the spectators didn't hold back. Amidst the laughter, Luo Zuishan was as anxious as an ant on a hot pan. He only knew that the sky pit had been destroyed, but he had no idea where Han Yunshi and Ji Yu were. Urgent, urgent, urgent. Suddenly, Qin Wangrong stood up from his seat, his expression gloomy and ugly. After standing there for a while, he said without hesitation, "Third Elder, it's midnight." That's right, midnight had arrived. Han Yunshi hadn't shown up. But a sudden announcement came from outside the courtyard. Tianning's Duke of Qin has arrived. Chapter 264. Tianning's Duke of Qin has arrived. His loud shout silenced everyone in the audience in an instant. No one expected Tianning's Duke of Qin to come to Medical City at a time like this. News of Han Yunshi and Jiyu Beiyue's misdiagnosis of Tianning's crown prince and their imprisonment in the imperial prisons had long spread. Apparently, His Highness Duke of Qin hadn't bailed out Han Yunshi the first time he'd visited the prisons. Instead, he'd instructed official Ouyang to go by the book and not make any exceptions. It was clear that he was abandoning the rook to save the king. He didn't want Han Yunshi to drag him down with her misdiagnosis of the crown prince. His Highness hadn't appeared when Luo Zuishan cried out for Han Yunshi and Jiyu Beiyue's innocence. So why had he come now? It was already midnight. Han Yunshi had already lost and was about to be blacklisted by Medical City. Wasn't he just asking to be disgraced by showing up now? Although Han Yunshi was the one who'd committed the crime, Han Yunshi still wore the hat of Qin Wangfei. She was Long Fei Yi's woman. Even if it was only in name, husband and wife would still share the same honor and disgrace. He was an intelligent man, so why didn't he understand that the wisest choice was to watch from the sidelines and not show his face? Qin Wangrong immediately stood up. He was the most surprised of all. Just yesterday, he'd exchanged letters with Tianning's emperor to discuss Long Fei Yi's attitude towards Han Yunshi. Back then, Tianning's emperor had given up on Han Yunshi because of Long Fei Yi. That was why he hadn't caused trouble for Han Yunshi. Otherwise, how could Han Yunshi have survived her imprisonment without suffering at all? After all, once official Ouyang of the justice courts had the support of Tianning's emperor, he wouldn't even give face to the Duke of Qin. Silence filled the courtyard as everyone watched Long Fei Yi walk in alone. His brocade robes were noble, his features cold and aloof. Every step he took tugged at the hearts of everyone present. There were people like that in this world. Once they appeared, even the moon in the sky would lose its luster. Your Highness Duke of Qin has graced us with your presence. Please forgive me for not going out to meet you. The fourth elder immediately stood up and gave up his seat. Although Long Fei Yi's seniority was lower than Rong Qinhuang's, his weight was heavier than his. Rong Qinhuang was polite to the three elders, but Long Fei Yi did not have this habit. Although it wasn't clear how much power this prince had in his hands, many facts had proven that there was no benefit in offending him, whether in Tianning or elsewhere. Third elder and fifth elder also stood up to welcome him. Third elder was quite courteous. Your Highness Duke of Qin, long time no see. Unexpectedly, Long Fei Yi said something that surprised everyone. He said, I heard that this prince's princess went missing in Medical City. Is that true? The third elder didn't expect this at all. He was dumbfounded. The people around him didn't understand for a while. Was His Highness here to look for the princess consort? Did he know about the bet between Han Yunshi and third elder? Did he know that it was already midnight and that Han Yunshi had already lost? No one could see through him. Third elder had no idea what was going on. Of course, he had seen the world before and quickly calmed down with a smile. Your Highness Duke of Qin's words are incorrect. Qin Wangfei didn't go missing, but fled to avoid punishment. Long Fei Yi wasn't in a rush to answer. He calmly sat down on his high seat as if this wasn't the medical academy, but Tianning. He wasn't the guest, but the host. His voice was cold and heavy as he asked slowly, Third elder, what crime has Qin Wangfei committed? Third elder's heart gave a start at these words. He was certain that Long Fei Yi had come with ill intentions. No matter why this fellow had stepped forward to protect Han Yunshi, third elder only knew that midnight had already passed. Han Yunshi had lost. If she lost, she had to pay the price. There were so many pairs of eyes here. No one in the medical academy was an exception. Tianning's Duke of Qin had a lot of face, but he wasn't planning to give it to him this time. Third elder didn't explain, but looked towards Qin Wangrong. The crime was set by Tianning's emperor, so it had nothing to do with the medical academy. Qin Wangrong didn't expect Long Fei Yi to really come to protect Han Yunshi. Now that things had gotten out of hand, if Long Fei Yi got his way, it'd be hard for him to explain things to Emperor Tianhui. Duke of Qin, the crown prince's life almost fell into Han Yunshi's hands. It's one thing for her and Jiyu Beiyu to misdiagnose, but she even dared to bet with third elder here. She's lost face for our Tianning. It's already past midnight, so if she didn't flee to avoid punishment, what else could it be? Qin Wangrong spoke with righteous indignation. But Long Fei Yi's voice turned cold. These are only your guesses. Who can prove that she fled to avoid punishment instead of being kidnapped? Stand out and explain everything to your lordship. Seeing Long Fei Yi's icy expression, no one dared to speak. Indeed, Han Yunshi and Jiyu Beiyu had mysteriously disappeared. It was possible that something had happened to them. No one dared to stand out. If they really were kidnapped, then they'd have to take responsibility. In the end, it was Qin Wangrong who answered. Duke of Qin, the crown prince's illness is the best proof. She's clearly lying. What acupuncture to expel the poison? It's all an act. What, Han Yunshi told you that Long Tianmo's recovered? Long Fei Yi arched a brow. Qin Wangrong was left speechless. When he thought carefully, Han Yunshi hadn't said that Long Tianmo's poison had been cured, much less that he'd recovered from Long Tianmo's illness. The matter of the detoxification was just a subjective assumption. She'd said she'd check up in 3 days, which meant he hadn't fully recovered yet. Everyone present that day had a guilty conscience, so no one dared to give Long Fei Yi a definite answer. At this moment, Lady Lianxin stepped forward and changed the topic. Your Highness Duke of Qin, no matter what, Qin Wangfei didn't come for a checkup or explain why the crown prince's illness had relapsed. She's lost her bet with third elder. No matter what. What did Lady Lianxin mean by that? No matter if Han Yunshi had been kidnapped or fled, she'd still lost. What a no matter what. Long Fei Yi's lips curved into a cold smile. He rose to his feet and looked disdainfully at Lady Lianxin. No matter what, they're missing. Your lordship will find your medical academy. So speaking, He looked towards Luo Zuishan. Director Luo, if your lordship remembers correctly, Qin Wangrong was the one who wanted to escort the two of them here. You were the one who said everything related to the medical academy's case was to be escorted by them. Luo Zuishan was stunned. He never expected Long Feiyi to point his spear at him. While he was trying to figure out how to reply, Long Feiyi's icy voice was tinged with anger. If Director Luo can't answer your lordship's question, please ask the academy head to come out. The academy head. All of the elders who just sat down sprang to their feet. Long Feiyi's words to a mere director showed that he didn't place any importance on the Council of Elders. But he had the strength and capital to do so. With his skills, it wasn't impossible for him to bypass the Council of Elders and find the academy head directly. Moreover, he seemed to be in the right here. When Long Tianmo had been kidnapped, Emperor Tianhui had given the medical academy a deadline of a few days to give an explanation. But this time, it was the Duke of Qin who'd come to demand an explanation. Emperor Tianhui was the ruler of a nation, after all. He had many misgivings about offending the medical academy, but His Highness Duke of Qin was different. Although he represented Tianing country as well, the throne didn't belong to him. Now that his relationship with Emperor Tianhui was so tense, it wasn't impossible for Emperor Tianhui to clean up after him if he offended the medical academy. Thinking up to here, even Qin Wangrong grew nervous, to say nothing of the elders. Just as Qin Wangrong was about to lower his stance and coax Emperor Tianhui, Luo Zuishan suddenly spoke up. Your Highness Duke of Qin is right. Qin Wangfei wouldn't run away for fear of punishment. She must have been kidnapped. Elders, you should hurry and send people to track her down. If anything happens to Qin Wangfei, it'll be hard for the medical academy to explain things to Tianing. Luo Zuishan braced himself to finish his words before everyone's eyes. How could he have the right to say such things with the elders present? Still, he had to say it and give the elders a way out. The situation had already escalated to a conflict between the medical academy and Tianing's imperial clan. Although the medical academy was strong, the academy head didn't want to provoke Tianing country and make enemies for himself. Third elder should set aside the bet for now. Finding Han Yunxi was more important. Otherwise, Long Feiyi's personality would make things worse as soon as he pursued the matter. Third elder furrowed his brows. Although he was unwilling, he didn't want to disturb the academy head either. He could only give in for now. Since that's the case, someone come. Hurry and send people to search the entire city. Then he comforted Long Feiyi. Your Highness Duke of Qin, if she was kidnapped, she must have a request. There'll definitely be news in a few days, so don't worry too much. He didn't believe that Han Yunxi had been kidnapped from the bottom of his heart. He was just going along with Long Feiyi's wishes for now. The medical academy's influence spread all over the world. He refused to believe that Han Yunxi and Jiyu Beiyu could hide for the rest of their lives. Once he caught them, he wouldn't let Han Yunxi off the hook no matter how long the bet was delayed. Tonight, he was supposed to wash away his previous humiliation, but he was the one who'd lost the most face. Third elder made his own plans, but he had no idea of Long Feiyi's true motives for showing up tonight. Long Feiyi sat back down and said indifferently, since Qin Wangfei was kidnapped, she can't be considered late even if it's past midnight. Third elder's eyes widened, and he almost couldn't catch his breath. Fifth elder was even more furious. Long Fei, you were simply helping Han Yunxi act shamelessly tonight. Fifth elder was about to explode, but third elder held him back. He had to endure. Han Yunxi had already escaped. No matter how much time she had, she still wouldn't be able to cure Long Tianmo. Long Feiyi sat there without speaking. From afar, it looked like he was waiting for someone. He had no intention of leaving, and the three elders didn't mind keeping him company. The people around them were also wasting their time here. No one could guess how the situation would develop. Not far away, Duanmu Yarrow was standing by the window of a nearby building, looking at the crowd in the courtyard. She could spot Long Feiyi at a glance. They'd been waiting in the secret room for a long time. As soon as the flesh-eating rats dispersed, Long Feiyi was the first to leave with Mu Ling. His speed was so fast that even Ji Yu hadn't reacted in time. by the time he caught up, it was already too late. Fortunately, she'd pestered Tang Li to find this place. She never believed that this guy would show up for Han Yunxi. She always assumed that Han Yunxi was just an excuse for him to refuse the marriage alliance and Emperor Tianhui's other women. She was just a woman who could cure his poison. Who knew that he'd not only publicly protected her multiple times in Tianing country, but outside of Tianing country as well? Long Fei Yi, are you serious? Hey, you're still not leaving? Tang Li's expression was helpless. He'd just finished dealing with Mu Ling but now he had to deal with Duan Mu Yaro. Dealing with Mu Ling was just locking her up for Long Fei Yi's punishment, but dealing with Duan Mu Yaro wasn't so simple. Zhang Yixie isn't that easy to find. Moreover, the poison beast's gone missing. Even if you can save Han Yunxi, she'll still lose face for senior brother. Duan Mu Yaro and Zhang Yixie were in cahoots, so of course she knew about the bone poison. As soon as Long Fei Yi left the sky pit, he'd sent all of his subordinates to track down Zhang Yixie. With the addition of the medical academy's men, it wouldn't be easy for Zhang Yixie to take Han Yunxi out of Medical City in less than a day. Tang Li wasn't stupid enough to reveal so much. He smiled and said, perhaps the Duke of Qin came here to lose face. He's happy to do so. Chapter 265. Afraid that Duan Mu Yaro didn't understand, Tang Li walked to the window and spoke even more bluntly. His Highness Duke of Qin is here to lose face for Qin Wangfei. Sigh, who can do anything about him? Duan Mu Yaro whipped her head around, her face turning green with anger. She glared fiercely at Tang Li enough. Tang Li shrugged and gestured for her to leave. Long Fei Yi had left Mu Linga under his watch, but not Duan Mu Yaro. This woman had come uninvited. Duan Mu Yaro ignored Tang Li's gesture and continued to look at the consultation hall. It was already an hour past midnight. Was Long Fei Yi going to sit there and wait until Han Yunxi appeared? When did he learn to wait for people? Han Yunxi had been kidnapped, so he should know that it wouldn't be easy to find her. How long was he going to wait? Was he stupid? Tang Li, if he wants to use Han Yunxi to deal with Zhang Yixie, I can help him. He doesn't need Han Yunxi, Duan Mu Yaro said seriously. She and Zhang Yixie hooked up because they both had their own desires. How could they be sincere? As long as Long Fei Yi asked, she would do her best to help. Tang Li tilted his head. Haha, how many times do I have to say it before you understand? Han Yunxi is Qin Wangfei. Do you understand? Han Yunxi was Qin Wangfei, Long Fei Yi's official wife. In fact, this could explain all of Long Fei Yi's actions. If they hadn't gone through so much together, Tang Li wouldn't have realized it when he saw that kiss and Long Fei Yi risking his life to enter the sinkhole. Things couldn't be simpler. With Long Fei Yi's personality, if there wasn't a place for Han Yunxi in his heart, how could there be a place for Han Yunxi in the Duke of Qin's mansion? In the name of praying for her husband's blessings, she could just casually send Han Yunxi to the temple to accompany the ancient Buddhas with the green lanterns. Duan Mu Yaro hated those words the most. She gave Tang Li a shove. Be serious. I'm not joking. Who's joking with you? Tang Li suddenly became angry. He was not familiar with her, okay? Don't make it seem like we are very close. Why are you being so serious? Senior brother has me in his heart, otherwise he wouldn't have saved me. You saw it yourself, he abandoned Han Yunxi in order to save me, Duan Mu Yaro said anxiously. Tang Li looked at the sky helplessly. Why were women so troublesome and so good at twisting the truth? Mu Linga had suddenly pushed Han Yunxi into the picture. Things had happened too quickly, and no one was prepared for it, okay? Tang Li couldn't be bothered to pay attention to Duan Mu Yaro. He was most worried about Long Fei Yi. That guy had been acting strange ever since he came out of the secret chamber. Actually, he was also surprised that he would expose his whereabouts and his protection of Han Yunxi. This wasn't good for him or Han Yunxi. Many times, it was precisely because he was protecting her that she would attract more danger. If he abandoned her, she would have fewer enemies. Tang Li, answer my question. Duanmu Yarrow grabbed onto Tang Li's clothes like a madwoman. Tang Li was really annoyed. This girl looked like a fairy, but her personality was like a witch's. And that Mu Ling she looked so cute. How could she bite the hand that fed her? No wonder Long Fei Yi wanted to imprison her. Women were really too scary. Duanmu Yarrow, your senior brother saved you because you're not 18 yet. If you were, and you were in cahoots with Zhang Yixie, your senior brother might kill you. Tang Li felt that he was being cruel, but he had to be cruel to a woman like Duanmu Yarrow. Only by being cruel could she come to her senses. Long Fei Yi had saved her life several times only because his sect had ordered him to protect this little junior sister until she turned 18. Long Fei Yi had agreed, but his so-called protection was only to ensure that Duanmu Yarrow didn't die. He never cared about anything else. Duanmu Yarrow was shocked. Who told you? Very few people knew about this. She thought that her senior brother wouldn't tell anyone, but, don't lie to yourself. Haha. Tang Li laughed coldly. Seeing the contempt in his eyes, Duanmu Yarrow's embarrassment turned to anger. She stomped her foot and said no more. Actually, she knew better than anyone else about this matter. She just kept avoiding it. She turned and stared unblinkingly at the courtyard in front of her. After a while, she muttered to herself, she likes to embarrass herself, right? I'll wait for her to embarrass herself. I'll wait for her to be banished. Han Yunxi, Long Fei Yi is so protective of you. I want you to offend the whole world. The medical school will be the first. Many people had come for the poison beast. Who knew how many more were lurking around to watch the show at the medical school, waiting for Han Yunxi to appear. After midnight, 2 hours passed very quickly, and the sky gradually brightened. Many people left, but most of them didn't. They stayed not to see Han Yunxi, but to see Long Fei Yi. This man had waited all night and had no intention of leaving. Did he really plan to sit here until Han Yunxi arrived? Long Fei Yi was waiting. He was waiting for news from his subordinates. He was also waiting for his heart to calm down. He knew very well that his actions were unwise. He also knew that there could be countless pairs of eyes watching him. However, he couldn't care less. That woman's despairing gaze made him understand for the first time in his life what fear was. He subconsciously wanted to do something for her to calm himself down. His subordinates and members of the medical academy had already scoured the city for him. Nobody knew that he'd deployed a secret army nearby to keep a tight watch on the outskirts of the medical academy. As long as Zhang Yixie dared to show up, he'd make sure he died without a grave. The sky gradually brightened. At this time, Han Yunxi had already collapsed in the grass, unconscious. She had held on for an entire night. Every step she took was done with willpower. She was such a stubborn woman, so stubborn that she wouldn't let herself go. Last night, it was already past midnight. It was clearly too late and she had lost, but she still did not give up. She continued to walk step by step until her entire body was crushed and she squatted down. She still wanted to prop herself up and continue. She persisted until she forgot what she was persisting for. She just wanted to keep walking like this without thinking too much. She wanted to empty her head and walk forever. When she reached Lotus Mountain and was about to enter the medical school, she couldn't take it anymore and collapsed. Actually, she was very ordinary. She would be tired, sad, hurt, and unable to hold on. By now, the white-robed man had already woken up. Although his inner energy and internal energy hadn't recovered much after a night's rest, his physical strength had recovered. He sat by Han Yunxi's side, his gentle, jade-like fingers gently caressing her cheeks as if she was a precious treasure. He was very careful, his eyes filled with tender affection. His fingers brushed past her eyebrows and nose. He wanted to touch her lips, but in the end he avoided them like a gentleman. He only helped her gather her long hair. Yunxi, I really want to take you away. He sighed softly, his voice so low that even he couldn't hear it. He took off his clothes and draped them over her shoulders before saying, It's a pity that I only have the right to protect you. The little squirrel had just woken up, its face full of exhaustion. Actually, it hadn't fainted from fright, but from losing its blood. It secretly crawled out of the medical pouch and glanced at its new master, then at the white-robed man. Very quickly, it silently hid back inside, completely unguarded against the white-robed man. The white-robed man sent Han Yunxi back to her room at the medical school. He was about to leave when the little squirrel suddenly jumped out of the pouch and onto his shoulder to grab his clothes. The white-robed man grew curious. Where did this little squirrel come from? Why wasn't it afraid of strangers? Was it Han Yunxi's pet? Or, Chi-Chi, Chi-Chi? The little squirrel cried out, waking Han Yunxi up. The white-robed man was about to leave when Han Yunxi called out, "Wait a minute." The white-robed man wanted to leave, but he smiled helplessly and stopped. "What's the matter? You didn't come for the poison beast, so why did you save me?" Han Yunxi asked seriously. "I'll tell you next time," the white-robed man said with his back to her. "I'm related to Western Qin's imperial family. Who's my mother? Who's my father?" Han Yunxi had too many questions, but before she could finish, the white-robed man left without looking back. He said he'd tell her next time, but when would they meet again? Han Yunxi gave a start, but quickly recovered her senses and got out of bed. It was already noon and she was late. How was Long Tianmo? She didn't think much of it, but hurried towards the consultation hall. She hadn't gone far when she ran into a few medical apprentices. "Qin Wangfei? You, where did you come from? Weren't you kidnapped?" The medical apprentices were all terrified. News of last night's dispute in the consultation hall had spread. Fortunately, the dean and the others rarely came to the consultation hall and didn't care much about the matters here. Otherwise, if they heard about it, even Third Elder would suffer. Since last night, His Highness Duke of Qin had been waiting without saying a word. Meanwhile, Third Elder was in the room trying to save Long Tianmo, but even now, he still couldn't make a diagnosis. According to the people in the room, Long Tianmo didn't have much time left. Han Yunxi ignored the strange gazes and whispers along the way and headed straight for the consultation hall. She didn't know if the guy trapped in the secret room had escaped. Would he look for her? Would he find this place? What would he do if he found out that she was chased out of the medical academy and was never allowed to enter again? Han Yunxi shook her head. Forget it, she didn't care. Now that things had come to this, she could only save him first. As for what Third Elder wanted to do with her, it was up to him. She had done her best and had a clear conscience. Ignoring the disappointment in her heart, Han Yunxi calmly strode forward. As soon as she reached the door, she saw that the courtyard was full of people, blocking her path and her view. What was going on? She was late for a night, but the courtyard was already packed. Would Third Elder feel uncomfortable if he didn't make a big deal out of it? She took a deep breath and said loudly, "I'll have to trouble you to step aside. Han Yunxi is here." As soon as she said this, everyone turned to look. Long Fei Yi, who was sitting in the main seat in front of the crowd, immediately stood up. His eyes, which had been cold all night, were finally warm with sunlight. Han Yunxi stared helplessly at the shocked eyes and said, "I'll have to trouble you to make way." This time, the group of people in front of her opened up a path with a swoosh. At this moment, Han Yunxi saw. Chapter 266. Everyone stepped aside. Seeing the tall and imposing figure in front of her, Han Yunxi was stunned. It was actually him, Long Fei Yi. Han Yunxi's mind went blank. She couldn't believe it. She stared blankly for a long time before the corners of her mouth slowly hooked up into a self-deprecating smile. She thought that she must still be on the road to unconsciousness. She must still be dreaming. Otherwise, why would this familiar figure appear in this public place? He couldn't wait to avoid her. Could it be that deep in her heart, she hadn't really given up, so she would dream of him like this? Han Yunxi didn't dare to think about it. She looked from afar, motionless. She hoped that she would wake up from her dream and continue on her way. But she was also afraid that if she woke up, everything would disappear. Long Fei Yi, don't move, okay? Just stand like this until the end of time, okay? As soon as he saw Han Yunxi, Long Fei Yi strode over. He, who usually didn't show his emotions, actually had joy written all over his face. But soon, he abruptly stopped. He was so close to rushing over and pulling this woman into his embrace, but in the end, he still noticed the white robe draped over her body. He recognized at a glance that it was the white robe of the man in white. Although Zhang Yixie was injured, Han Yunqi definitely couldn't fight against Zhang Yixie with her own strength. If she was saved by his people or the medical school's people, someone would have reported it. How did this woman come back? Did the white-robed man save her? Why did the white-robed man lead them to the Shen Gold door? When the Jiyu Shu attacked them, how did the white-robed man find the mechanism to open the door? Facing the Jiyu Shu, he had the ability to escape by himself. Why did he overdraft his internal energy to save Han Yunqi? If he came for the poisonous beast, why did he disappear when he entered the door? Long Fei Yi had too many questions. And the most fundamental of these questions was undoubtedly Han Yunqi's identity. Was she an orphan of Western Qin? The person the Shadow Clan wanted to protect? He had already found clues about Madame Tianxin's identity in Medicine City, but he had never thought that this woman would be related to the royal family of Western Qin. This was the last thing he wanted. Amidst the thousands of people, the two of them stood far away and looked at each other. Qin Wangfei, you're finally back. So you weren't kidnapped? Madame Lianxin suddenly broke the silence. Her words were a death sentence for Han Yunqi. She was late because she hadn't been kidnapped. She was bound to lose. Only then did Long Fei Yi recover from his messy thoughts. All the feelings were restrained in his heart. His handsome face was once again filled with the coldness that kept people 1,000 miles away. Han Yunqi, what are you waiting for? Why aren't you coming over? He opened his mouth, his tone revealing his impatience. This fellow was always able to shatter her dreams with a single sentence or even an expression. Fine. Han Yunqi calmed down and looked at him seriously. After making sure that he was not injured when he came back from the crater, she strode over. She didn't know what was going on here, nor did she know what he was here for. Your Highness, why are you here? She bowed in greeting. She knew that she had to play along with him in public. However, she didn't look directly into his eyes like before. Seeing her avoid him, a complicated look flashed through Long Fei Yi's eyes, but he didn't reveal anything. He looked down at Han Yunqi from above. His cold gaze scanned her from head to toe. Aside from the bloodstains on her white clothes, he didn't see any signs of injury. Rise. What happened to you? Why are there bloodstains on this prince's clothes? In the silence, his low voice didn't contain any emotion, but it was especially clear. Everyone could hear it. Perhaps it was because Han Yunqi's appearance was too unexpected, but when Long Fei Yi said this, the surrounding people finally noticed that Han Yunqi was wearing a man's clothes. Han Yunqi also only realized it now. She had come in such a hurry that she didn't even notice that the clothes had returned to her body. These clothes gave her a sense of security when she was most afraid in her life. If it wasn't for the man in white, she thought that her life would be over. A woman wearing a man's clothes and appearing here in such a sorry state. Anyone would think the wrong thing. Everyone only realized it in hindsight, but the attentive Long Fei Yi had already blocked all the rumors for her with a single sentence. However, how could Han Yunqi explain that his clothes were on her body? Han Yunqi lowered her eyes and hesitated. It seems that Your Highness Duke of Qin has already seen Qin Wangfei. Lady Lianxin immediately grasped their weakness. At this time, Tang Li walked out from the crowd with a mocking expression. Fifth Elder, it was my master who saved Qin Wangfei when she was kidnapped. He was hoping that the medical academy would save her, but they probably haven't found her yet, right? As he spoke, he gave Han Yunqi a look, then turned to respectfully bow to Long Fei Yi. Reporting to Your Highness, this subordinate found esteemed Wangfei in the western part of the city. It's a pity that the kidnappers escaped. Your Highness, please mete out punishment. Tang Li, the young master of the Tang clan, was condescending like this. If the people of the Tang clan saw him, would they despise him? Hidden in the crowd, Duanmu Yarrow was so angry that her face turned green. She only knew that Tang Li was Long Fei Yi's good friend, but she didn't know his identity. She had to think of a way to get rid of this annoying guy. Long Fei Yi nodded and waved his hand, indicating for Tang Li to withdraw. The master-servant play between the two didn't feel out of place at all. When Tang Li looked at Long Fei Yi, he actually felt inferior. He silently retreated to the side. There was no helping it, this guy's aura was too strong. So Your Highness Duke of Qin was personally protecting her the entire way. It's good that Qin Wangfei has returned safely, that's good. Fourth Elder said with a smile. These seemingly casual words set off a huge wave in many people's hearts. There were so many rumors, both true and false. Today, they saw with their own eyes and heard with their own ears that His Highness Duke of Qin still cared about this woman. Long Fei Yi didn't refute Fourth Elder's words, but he also didn't admit it. He remained silent. Han Yunxi had long been used to it. When it came to her, he was always silent. It seemed like he was admitting it, but that wasn't the case. She knew better than anyone else the true reason Long Fei Yi came to Medical City. Too lazy to think about it, Han Yunxi didn't want to discuss this topic any longer. She was a smart person, so she immediately understood Tang Li's words. She looked towards Third Elder and regained her confident and calm appearance. She smiled and said, Third Elder didn't misunderstand that I ran away to avoid punishment, right? Long Fei Yi said last night that Qin Wangfei was kidnapped because the medical academy didn't protect her well enough. Even if she was late, it didn't count as a loss. She had to wait. If Third Elder continued to insist that she was late, Long Fei Yi would hold the medical academy accountable. Third Elder was very helpless. In addition, he hadn't been able to diagnose Long Fei Yi's illness last night. He wanted to make things difficult for Han Yunxi, but he didn't have the strength. How could there be a misunderstanding? Haven't we been waiting for you until now? Third Elder smiled insincerely. Hypocrite. Han Yunxi sneered in her heart. She didn't want to waste her breath on this group of people. I will first examine His Highness, then explain the reason for the relapse of his illness. She only wanted to save him and leave. However, Long Fei Yi spoke up. I heard that Third Elder treated him last night. I presume that Qin Wangfei doesn't need to be examined again? This was simply asking a question that he already knew the answer to. Third Elder exploded in anger. He already gave the Duke of Qin face. Couldn't the Duke of Qin leave him some face? From an outsider's perspective, Long Fei Yi was stepping on Third Elder's old face to avenge Han Yunxi. However, those who knew the truth about the bone poison understood that Long Fei Yi was helping Han Yunxi out of her predicament. There wasn't even a shadow of the poison beast, so where did the antidote come from? Han Yunxi was clearly holding on. Now was the time for her to follow Long Fei Yi's steps. Han Yunxi naturally knew that Long Fei Yi was helping her out of her predicament, but she didn't need to. Actually, he didn't need to show up. Even if she risked her life, she wouldn't let him or the Duke of Qin's estate lose face. Grand Concubine Yi had warned her on the very first day that her every word and action represented the Duke of Qin and his estate. Thus, she couldn't lose face. She'd always remembered that. Han Yunxi was about to speak when a familiar voice carried over. Since she was kidnapped and not late, of course she has to be examined. Your Highness Duke of Qin, this is still a bet. With so many people waiting, there's no way you can just leave it at that. This princess heard the news and made a special trip to the medical academy to broaden my horizons. It was Duanmu Yarrow. Han Yunxi turned to see Duanmu Yarrow standing on one side, looking at her provocatively. If it wasn't for Long Fei Yi saving her, this woman wouldn't be standing here safe and sound. Zhang Yixie would have tossed her out to block the flesh-eating rats long ago. Did Long Fei Yi bring her here? Although she didn't tell on him, Long Fei Yi had seen her with his own eyes. This woman and Zhang Yixie had hooked up together. It was one thing for him to save her, but now he was keeping her by his side. Han Yunxi looked at Duanmu Yarrow with cold eyes. Her heart had been tossing and turning all night, but now it was filled with disdain. She was really angry. Duanmu Yarrow didn't back down in the face of Han Yunxi's icy glare. Zhang Yixie had said that there was no antidote for Long Tianmo's poison, and that Han Yunxi hadn't found the poison beast yet. Long Fei Yi had helped her put on an act, but they couldn't fool her. Even if her senior brother was angry today, she was going to tear down the stage. She wanted her senior brother to see how his Qin Wangfei made a fool of herself. Third elder, are you planning to let things go as well? Hihi, won't third elder take advantage of you like this? Duanmu Yarrow looked like she was joking, but she was actually trying to provoke third elder. With third elder's status, he'd lose a lot of face if he lost. But if he backed down, he'd be the subject of ridicule. From his own standpoint, third elder only wanted to keep the peace. But from the standpoint of the Council of Elders and the Medical Academy, he'd lose with dignity and dignity even if he lost. Ignoring Duanmu Yarrow, he looked towards Han Yunxi and gestured for her to enter. Qin Wangfei, Tianning's crown prince, is in the rooms. Please, come on in. Duanmu Yarrow looked at Han Yunxi with amusement and anticipation. She smiled meaningfully and said, Qin Wangfei, your poison skills are so formidable. You won't lose face for His Highness Duke of Qin, right? Han Yunxi was about to enter the rooms when her temper flared at these words. Today, she was going to teach Duanmu Yarrow a lesson, not for Long Fei Yi's sake, but because the sight of this woman really pissed her off. Note to the readers, tomorrow is still the third update. Chapter 267. Han Yunxi could see through Duanmu Yarrow's little scheme. Duanmu Yarrow had hooked up with Zheng Yixie, so she must know that there was no antidote for the bone poison. She also knew that no one had even seen the shadow of the poison beast in the sky pit. She was certain that she wouldn't be able to save Long Tianmo. Very well, let's see who's going to eat who today. Han Yunxi's icy gaze bore down on Duanmu Yarrow as she retorted rudely, Princess Duan's marriage has been rejected by His Highness. Whether or not His Highness loses face has nothing to do with Princess Duan, right? No one had expected that Han Yunxi would use the matter of the political marriage to counter Duanmu Yarrow in front of everyone. Back then, as the Empress of the Palace, she hadn't said a single word about the political marriage. Her stance was just like the Empress of the Palace scolding a mistress. In an instant, everyone turned to look at Duanmu Yarrow, their gazes filled with mockery, contempt, and sympathy. Duanmu Yarrow hadn't expected this at all. She'd originally been calm and composed as a spectator, but who knew that she'd become the butt of everyone's jokes? She'd been able to hold it in at first, but after hearing the waves of mocking laughter, her eyes filled with tears. For a woman, what could be more humiliating than being rejected in marriage? Duanmu Yarrow flew into a rage out of humiliation. Han Yunxi, don't go overboard. Unexpectedly, Han Yunxi had an innocent expression. The one who rejected you was the Duke of Qin, not me. If you want to blame someone, blame him. She was very angry today. She didn't care what kind of relationship Long Fei Yi and Duanmu Yarrow had. If anyone made her unhappy, forget about Duanmu Yarrow, even if it was Long Fei Yi, this tyrant, she'd still dare to provoke him. When these words came out, the entire crowd fell silent. Long Fei Yi's cold and resolute mouth twitched. He probably hadn't expected this either. But he didn't say anything and just watched in silence. You. Duanmu Yarrow was so angry that she was about to cry, unable to speak. There were many rumors about her rejection of the marriage alliance. Some of them were even released by her on purpose. She wanted the world to think that the Duke of Qin had his reasons for rejecting her. This way, she could at least save her face. However, Han Yunxi's words clearly told everyone that it was the Duke of Qin's own idea to reject the marriage alliance. It had nothing to do with anyone else and there was no inside story. It was purely because the Duke of Qin didn't want her. If this news spread out, how would she have the face to see others in the future? What about me? Han Yunxi had an innocent look on her face as she continued to tease, Princess Yarrow, if I were you, I would definitely stay far away from the Duke of Qin. Wouldn't that be too embarrassing? Han Yunxi, you've gone too far. Duanmu Yarrow was truly angered to the point of tears. She wanted nothing more than to draw her sword and hack this woman to death, but she had no choice but to endure. She couldn't make a move here. If she did, she'd lose. She turned to Long Fei Yi, Her voice choked with sobs. Senior brother, look at her. She's such a bully. Long Fei Yi ignored Duanmu Yaro. He kept looking at Han Yunxi, but Han Yunxi wasn't looking at him. This woman hadn't looked him in the eye since she'd appeared. In fact, he hated women arguing the most. But looking at Han Yunxi's profile, he suddenly wished that she would turn around and tell him what she wanted him to do. Unfortunately, Han Yunxi didn't turn around. She stood in the middle of the crowd like a proud and lonely warrior. Senior brother. Duanmu Yaro stomped her feet and whined. She stubbornly believed that her senior brother hadn't saved her in the sky pit only because of his promise to her master. They'd entered Tianshan Ken's as children and were Tianshan Ken's only two closed-door disciples. After so many years of being fellow disciples, it was impossible for them to not have any feelings for each other. It was just that he was naturally cold and indifferent, not good at expressing himself. Everyone was waiting for Long Fei Yi to make a statement, but Han Yunxi didn't turn around. Long Fei Yi waited for Long Fei Yi. In the end, he didn't say anything, nor did he look at Duanmu Yaro. Duanmu Yaro had said many things wrong, but she was right about one thing. This man was naturally cold and indifferent. Ignoring her was his response to her. She'd never get a response from him. Long Fei Yi remained silent. A trace of disappointment flitted across Han Yunxi's eyes, but it quickly disappeared. She finally turned around, still avoiding Long Fei Yi's gaze. She smiled. His Highness Duke of Qin has tacitly agreed. Princess Duan, I think you should leave. You. Duanmu Yaro was so angry she wanted to vomit blood. Helpless, she could only change the topic. Qin Wangfei, you don't need to waste time with words. A life is at stake. For a doctor like you, isn't time of the essence? You should hurry up and save him. Princess Duan, this Wangfei made a bet with Third Elder. The one waiting for this Wangfei to save is my Tianning's crown prince. What does it have to do with you whether or not this Wangfei saves him? What are you in such a rush for? Han Yunxi was calm and composed. Because this princess wants to see if you really have the skills, or if you're just a swindler with an undeserved reputation. Duanmu Yaro pressed aggressively. Did this Wangfei trick you or swindle you? Princess Duan, this Wangfei only beat you at the Plum Blossom Poetry Meet, so you can't compose poems for the rest of your life. You're not still brooding over that, are you? Han Yunxi dug up another old score. What a humiliation that was. Anyone in her place would brood over it for the rest of their lives, all right? Han Yunxi actually asked so self-righteously. Quite a few people around them couldn't help but laugh. Voices rose from all directions as well. The Western Jew princess was a woman who excelled in all three aspects of literature, martial arts, and looks. Every year, countless people would seek an audience with her because of her reputation. Now it seemed that she didn't live up to her reputation. In terms of appearance, she was beautiful, but her expression was unkind. Just look at her angry appearance. She looked like a tigress that wanted to eat someone. In terms of talent, she actually lost to Han Yunxi, who was born a commoner. In terms of martial arts, that wasn't what everyone cared about. In this era, it was virtuous for a woman to not have any martial arts skills. Hearing the whispers around her and the occasional mocking laughter, Duanmu Yaro's fairy-like face turned sinister. She didn't want to bring up old scores with this woman, but this woman was using them to humiliate her. Han Yunxi, you're clearly stalling for time because you can't save anyone. She angrily said. I'm not. Han Yunxi loudly retorted. Then you should go save them. Duanmu Yaro didn't want to continue arguing with Han Yunxi. If this continued, who knows what other old scores Han Yunxi would dig up. But Duanmu Yaro realized it too late. Han Yunxi didn't rush her. Princess Duan, I saw you with Northern Li's Duke of Kang before. I heard that he's a poisons expert as well. I don't know if His Highness Duke of Kang is here yet, but I'd like to ask him to be my witness. Han Yunxi's words sent the entire crowd into an uproar. Everyone knew about the relationship between Tianning, Western Jew, and Northern Li, but Duanmu Yaro had actually hooked up with Zhang Yixie. This wasn't just a personal friendship, but a matter of national importance. In a flash, Duanmu Yaro's red face turned ashen white. She never expected Han Yunxi to expose her relationship with Zhang Yixie in a public place like this. She even revealed that Zhang Yixie knew the poison arts. More than half of the medical academy was paying attention to today's events. Han Yunxi's words would soon spread throughout the academy, medical city, and all of Cloud Realm continent. How was she supposed to explain things to Imperial Father then? Imperial Father didn't like her very much after the marriage alliance was rejected, and Zhang Yixie knew the poison arts. What kind of waves would that cause in Northern Li? She couldn't care less about Zhang Yixie now. In any case, she was in big trouble. Han Yunxi, don't frame me, she denied in a rush. Han Yunxi finally turned to look at Long Fei Yi. Your Highness Duke of Qin, you saw Princess Duan and the Duke of Kang together with your own eyes. Chen Qie isn't lying, right? Frightened, Duanmu Yarrow immediately looked towards Long Fei Yi with pleading eyes. She'd already told Tang Li that if senior brother needed her, she could help him deal with Zhang Yixie. Senior brother had grown up in the imperial clan like her, so he knew what would happen to a princess of marriageable age who lost favor. Senior brother, you can't be so heartless. Long Fei Yi didn't pay any attention to Duanmu Yarrow. He looked at Han Yunxi's serious expression and couldn't help but feel warmth in his eyes. This woman had done a wonderful job. He was just worried that he wouldn't have a chance to spread the news that Duanmu Yarrow and Zhang Yixie were together and that Zhang Yixie knew the poison arts. Just like that, Han Yunxi helped him settle the matter. He didn't answer immediately, as if he wanted to look at Han Yunxi for a while longer. Helpless, Han Yunxi only looked at him for a while before averting her eyes. Her clear eyes didn't show much emotion. Long Fei Yi finally gathered his thoughts and said calmly, this prince saw it. Third elder doesn't know the poison arts, so Princess Duan might as well invite the Duke of Kang out to be their witness. Han Yunxi wasn't surprised that Long Fei Yi would give such a reply. This matter involved the relationship between the three countries. If this matter was spread, it would only benefit Long Fei Yi. However, Duanmu Yarrow was in despair. Senior brother, her voice was stuck in her throat and her eyes reddened. She really wanted to cry. Han Yunxi's words didn't carry much weight, but Long Fei Yi was different. Who wouldn't believe him? She wouldn't be able to survive in Western Zhu's imperial clan. There were all sorts of speculations around them. Some even said that Duanmu Yarrow and Zhang Yixie were having an affair, which was why the Duke of Qin refused the marriage. Duanmu Yarrow stood in place, gritting her teeth. She glared at Han Yunxi with a murderous glare. She had paid a heavy price to see Han Yunxi lose. No matter what, she would never let go of Long Tianmo's poisoning. Han Yunxi, don't even think about hiding. Today, this princess's reputation will be ruined. You'll have to accompany me. Duanmu Yarrow's expression was fierce. She was about to speak, but Han Yunxi didn't even give her a chance to speak. She beat her to it. Princess Duan, since you care so much about whether I win or lose, come in with me if you have the guts. I'll show you. After she finished speaking, she gracefully turned around and strode into the house. Seeing this, the surrounding discussion stopped at the same time. They only felt that this woman's walking posture was so noble. Only when Han Yunxi entered the room did Duanmu Yarrow regain her senses. She was supposed to use this matter to make things difficult for Han Yunxi, but Han Yunxi had used it to provoke her. A deep sense of defeat rose in her heart. What had she become? Wishful thinking? Was she trying to fool herself and others? She couldn't accept this. Han Yunxi must be faking it. She must be scaring me. Duanmu Yarrow followed her in without hesitation. Chapter 268. Long Fei Yi didn't follow her in. Like everyone else, his eyes were focused on the door as he waited. His slightly furrowed brows revealed the uneasiness in his heart. That woman had been avoiding him, but she just walked in like that. What did she mean? Couldn't she see that he was here to save her? Could it be that she had the confidence to save Long Tianmo? Where did she get the antidote? No matter what, she should have given him a look, but she didn't. It was as if she was ignoring his existence. Being ignored made Long Fei Yi feel very bad. Hey, what's Han Yunxi doing? Tang Li was also baffled. At first, he thought that Han Yunxi would cooperate with them to the end and give up the bet, leaving the consultation to Shi Yubor and Luo Zuishan to argue. But who knew that Han Yunxi actually went to save him, and even walked in so confidently? Long Fei Yi didn't answer, but his gaze deepened. Tang Li was also silent. After a long time, he asked tentatively, could it be that the Shadow Clan member helped her find the blood of the poisonous beast? Tang Li looked sloppy, but his thoughts were very deep. Many times, he didn't ask, but that didn't mean that he didn't see it. When Han Yunxi appeared just then, Long Fei Yi had almost lost control. He'd seen it all. This time, Long Fei Yi didn't hesitate to use the secret army that he had raised for many years. He was undoubtedly throwing caution to the wind. What could make him calm down in an instant other than the news of the orphan of the Western Qin imperial family? The Shadow Clan member was so protective of Han Yunxi. If it wasn't for the poisonous beast, then it could only be for Han Yunxi. Tang Li asked so bluntly, but Long Fei Yi still didn't respond. Tang Li looked at him with an annoyed expression. Your woman is most likely the orphan of the Western Qin imperial family. Tang Li simply said things more bluntly. En. Long Fei Yi finally responded. And then? What should we do? Tang Li's face was filled with melancholy. Han Yunxi's appearance had derailed their original plans, causing them to change again and again. But now that the Shadow Clan had appeared, it wasn't as simple as changing their plans. He hesitated for a moment and then said seriously, at least take back the perplexing butterfly illusion first. We can't leave it with her. Helpless, Long Fei Yi refused to answer. Tang Li did not know what to do with him. He could only comfort himself that fortunately, Long Fei Yi was still able to remain calm after seeing the white coat. He did not fall too deeply into it. However, Tang Li could not figure out how Long Fei Yi would deal with Han Yunxi. Everyone was waiting outside the house, and so was everyone inside the house. Han Yunxi sat on the edge of the bed, surrounded by several elders, 2 directors, and Qin Wang Rong. Duanmu Yarrow stood on the other side, her gaze never leaving Han Yunxi's hand, as if she wanted to see some clues. Han Yunxi allowed her to look. Of course, she was not stupid enough to take out the poison beast's blood in front of everyone. She had already put the poison beast's blood into the detoxification system and applied it to the golden needles. As long as she applied the needles, the poison beast's blood would seep into Long Tianmo's joints. Not only did she apply the antidote, she also added some special medicine. This was even more effective than directly taking the antidote. Long Tianmo was in a half-conscious, half-unconscious state. He was already tormented by pain to the point that he only had half his life left. It was unknown if he was aware of everything that was happening around him, but in short, his half-open eyes were filled with Han Yunxi's shadow. The room was silent, and no one spoke. Han Yunxi also did not explain anything. Just like last time, she applied the needles, expelling the poison from every part of Zheng Yixie's body, and then applied the medicine. This process was very difficult for Han Yunxi, but it was also very long for the people around her. Han Yunxi continued to apply the needles. Not to mention these 6 or 7 people watching, even if the whole world was watching, she could still concentrate and do it in an orderly manner. This time, not only did she want Long Tianmo to fully recover, she also wanted Long Tianmo to be completely awake. Third Elder and the others sometimes looked at Han Yunxi, and sometimes they looked at each other in dismay. Han Yunxi's technique was no different from the previous treatment, so how could this be called a follow-up? This was clearly a new treatment. Third Elder couldn't save Long Tianmo himself, so he really hoped that the bet could be cancelled. Since it couldn't be cancelled, he really wanted to find Han Yunxi's weakness and fight her to a draw. That way, he wouldn't lose too much face. Qin Wangfei, are you here for a follow-up visit? Third Elder asked. Han Yunxi buried her head in the needles and casually asked, what else? You're doing a new treatment, right? 3 days ago, you didn't detoxify the poison. Third Elder guessed. Han Yunxi's gaze was still deep as she focused on Long Tianmo's joints. Her lips curled into a cold smile as she replied carelessly, detoxification with needles is like this. So third elder doesn't understand? Old man doesn't understand detoxification with needles. Third elder angrily replied. As soon as he said it, he realized that he had fallen into Han Yunxi's trap, but it was too late. Since third elder doesn't understand, then don't speak nonsense. Han Yunxi smiled. Even third elder had suffered a setback, so who else dared to speak? Shi Yubor and Luo Zuishan stood to the left and right, each with their own thoughts and unease. Duanmu Yarrow watched from the side, waiting without a word. No one knew what she was thinking. Third elder, help me take a look at the crown prince's complexion. Han Yunxi suddenly spoke. At this time, everyone focused on Han Yunxi's hands turned to look at Long Tianmo. Once they did, they couldn't shift their gazes away. They had never seen a patient recover so quickly. Long Tianmo's complexion had originally been as pale as paper, without a trace of blood. His eyes were also half-lidded, as if they could close at any moment. But now, his face was rosy. Terminal lucidity? Duanmu Yarrow couldn't help but ask. Most people would have this kind of reaction when they saw this situation. However, there were many famous doctors present. Even the lowest-ranked fifth elder, Madame Lianxin, could see that this was not the final radiance of the setting sun. This was a recovery of color. Third elder's face was full of disbelief. He couldn't care less as he strode forward to take Long Tianmo's pulse. Unexpectedly, Long Tianmo's originally weak pulse had suddenly become strong, no different from a normal person's. He's really recovered? Fourth elder asked hastily. Although third elder didn't want to admit it, he still nodded. He's recovered 70 to 80%. Remove these needles and you'll recover 90%, Han Yunxi said mildly. How did you do it? Third elder was very serious. Unexpectedly, Han Yunxi removed the needles and personally covered Long Tianmo with a blanket. She continued, Your Highness Crown Prince, you'll need to recuperate for the last 10%. Remember to rest more when you return to Tianning. The poison in your body has been purged, so don't worry. As it turned out, she was talking to Long Tianmo. Third elder coughed lightly a few times. How awkward. Long Tianmo slowly opened his half-lidded eyes, which were filled with vigor. He stared at her for a long time before he muttered, Han Yunxi, it's you again. That's right, it was her again. She'd saved him twice and nearly lost her life because of him both times. Call me Imperial Aunt, how impudent. Han Yunxi teased as she tucked him in again before rising to her feet. Long Tianmo didn't pay attention to his surroundings, but kept his gaze on Han Yunxi. Unfortunately, Han Yunxi didn't have time to respond to him. Third elder, the poison's been cured. Before Han Yunxi could finish, Duanmu Yarrow hastily cut her off. She'd been waiting for this moment. Third elder, invite a poisons expert to examine him. She can't just say whatever she says. Han Yunxi already had this intention. Since Duanmu Yarrow was in such a rush, she would definitely regret it later. With last time's experience, third elder had learned his lesson this time and had already sent a powerful poisons expert to the side room. But judging from Long Tianmo's complexion, he knew that his actions were superfluous. Forget it. Third elder gave a faint sigh. We can't just let it go like this. It's hard to convince everyone without an examination. There are so many people waiting outside, Duanmu Yarrow anxiously said. She hated that she couldn't tell everyone the truth about the bone poison. She knew that Han Yunxi didn't have an antidote, so she must have done something to Long Tianmo being able to wake up. What? Are you representing everyone outside to spy on this princess? Han Yunxi coldly asked. So what if I am? Duanmu Yarrow replied without any trace of politeness. Then I'll have to trouble you to tell everyone the results later. Han Yunxi was very polite. Don't worry. Duanmu Yarrow was brimming with confidence. There were indeed many people waiting outside. When third elder sent for the poisons expert, the other elders were all disappointed. Only Duanmu Yarrow looked on expectantly. Long Tianmo looked deeply at Duanmu Yarrow, but didn't say anything. After the poisons expert finished his examination, Duanmu Yarrow impatiently asked, How is it? Hihi, Qin Wangfei is so amazing. This one couldn't even find any traces of being poisoned. Admirable, admirable. The poisons expert's expression was one of worship. What? Duanmu Yarrow shook her head in disbelief. Impossible, you clearly didn't have an antidote. Princess Duan is so sure. Could it be that you were the one who poisoned him? Han Yunxi asked back. Only then did Duanmu Yarrow realize that she had lost her composure. She immediately denied it. I didn't, I was just guessing. Han Yunxi was too lazy to argue with her. She tidied up her things and carried her medical bag on one shoulder. Crossing her arms, she seriously said, now that the crown prince has recovered, I'll have to trouble Princess Duan to go out and tell everyone. This time, Duanmu Yarrow was completely stupefied. She had just argued with Han Yunxi in front of everyone until her face turned red and she was even humiliated. If she were to go out and publicly admit that Han Yunxi had cured Long Tianmo, where would she put her face? She'd simply become a laughingstock if she went out. Unfortunately, it was too late. Princess Duan, let's go out together. Han Yunxi personally opened the door. The moment the door opened, everyone outside focused on them. Han Yunxi purposely stepped aside. Princess Duan, please. Seeing the dense crowd outside, especially Long Fei Yi, Duanmu Yarrow wanted nothing more than to find a hole to crawl into and escape. She hesitated and didn't move. What is it? Is Princess Duan going back on her word or are you afraid to go out? Han Yunxi's mocking smile was especially glaring to Duanmu Yarrow's eyes. She suddenly groaned and almost vomited blood. This was what it meant to go too far. If she didn't go out, wouldn't Han Yunxi look down on her even more? Duanmu Yarrow clenched her fists and walked out, Han Yunxi following closely behind. For a moment, everyone's eyes fell on them. Han Yunxi leaned against the door with her arms crossed. Duanmu Yarrow stood in the doorway with her head lowered, unable to speak for a long time. Princess Duan, how's the situation? Someone suddenly asked loudly. Duanmu Yarrow had never been so embarrassed in her life. She almost wailed out loud, but she suppressed the humiliation and fear and said in a choked voice, Han Yunxi cured him. Her voice was so soft that only Han Yunxi could hear her. Han Yunxi kicked her with the tip of her foot and laughed. It doesn't count if you can't hear me. The usually proud Duanmu Yarrow was like a drowning dog at this moment. She sniffled, closed her eyes, and shouted, Han Yunxi cured him. Chapter 269. Han Yunxi cured her. Duanmu Yarrow's shout broke the silence in the courtyard. The confused crowd gave a start before bursting into laughter. All sorts of taunts were hurled at Duanmu Yarrow. Who would like a meddlesome woman like Duanmu Yarrow? Her argument with Han Yunxi had already caused discontent among the crowd. Now there were plenty of people who wanted to hit her while she was down. Qin Wangfei, beautifully done. He, that's what happens when you meddle in other people's business. Aya, didn't Princess Duan just say she couldn't cure the poison? Haha, Princess Duan, what did you say? Say it again, we didn't hear you. Duanmu Yarrow wanted to cry herself to death. This was the first time she'd felt so helpless. Although she didn't want to admit it, she knew she'd underestimated Han Yunxi. She was too proud and conceited. She'd never put any other woman her age in her eyes, but now she'd kicked an iron plate. It was too late for regrets. If she knew this would happen, she wouldn't have provoked Han Yunxi at all. She didn't dare to look at the crowd, but stole a glance at Long Fei Yi, only to see Long Fei Yi smiling as well. Heavens! She'd been his junior sister for so many years, but she'd never seen him smile. She never expected to see him laugh at her like this. Duanmu Yarrow didn't want to live any longer. She muffled her mouth and turned to run away. Now that she'd run away crying, news of today's events would spread very quickly. Whether it was Duanmu Yarrow's humiliation or her alliance with Jun Yixie, they'd all become the headlines of Cloud Realm Continent. Long Fei's rejection of the marriage alliance had already greatly affected her marriage plans. What kind of man would be willing to marry a woman rejected by another man? Duanmu Yarrow might still be able to marry into a good family with her status as the princess of the first wife, But even if Western Jew's emperor didn't depose her now, no one would want her with such a bad reputation. This was fatal to women. Seeing Duanmu Yaro's fleeing form, Han Yunxi's gloomy mood relaxed considerably. If she was willing to look at Long Feiye, she'd definitely see his smile just then. Unfortunately, she still avoided him. Qin Wang Rong stayed behind to accompany Long Tianmo, while Third Elder and the others walked out. Duanmu Yaro was just an interlude that brought disgrace upon herself. This wager belonged to Third Elder and Han Yunxi, and they had yet to settle their differences. Since the wager wasn't cancelled, they had to see it through to the end. Han Yunxi looked at the courtyard full of people and then at Luo Zuishan. Sure enough, Luo Zuishan had been giving her meaningful looks. Luo Zuishan had told her the truth about Long Tianmo's big belly on the way to the crater. Long Tianmo had been poisoned by a Jiyu worm. His stomach was bloated because of the Jiyu worm. Jiyu arts were a kind of poison technique created by the poison sect. There were 3 types of Jiyu: grass Jiyu, insects Jiyu, and humans Jiyu. Each type of Jiyu was further subdivided. This was definitely a taboo in the medical academy. She didn't know where Shi Yubo had learned it, but Luo Zuishan had heard of it, but didn't understand it. Han Yunxi was puzzled. Luo Zuishan and Shi Yubo were both directors and 6th-rank primogenitors. If Shi Yubo knew it, Luo Zuishan should know as well, or perhaps an expert had helped Shi Yubo plant the Jiyu? Of course, this wasn't a question she needed to consider. What she needed to consider was whether she could reveal the truth in a public setting like this. Once the news spread, it'd implicate a lot of people. Shi Yubo would be the first to bear the brunt of the punishment from the medical academy, but Han Yunxi was more concerned about how many people in the world would come for the Jiyu arts. It was rumored that the poison sect's destruction had something to do with Jiyu arts. In the end, Jiyu arts were a disaster. On the side, Luo Zuishan was giving her meaningful looks, telling her to keep it a secret. If she didn't reveal it, what would happen to her bet with Third Elder? Third Elder probably didn't know the truth. If he did, he would never have agreed to a public consultation. Han Yunxi was weighing the pros and cons, and so was Third Elder. After seeing Duanmu Yaro's fate and witnessing Han Yunxi's ability to save people twice, the dignified 7th-rank sage Dr. Third Elder felt lingering fear. He rejoiced that he had been careful when he made the bet with Han Yunxi and hadn't just bet on saving Long Tianmo. They had agreed that Han Yunxi would not only save Long Tianmo, but also explain why Long Tianmo's old illness had flared up. Third Elder couldn't win now, but he could still fight for a tie. That way, he wouldn't lose too much face for the Council of Elders. At this time, the silent Shi Yubo suddenly leaned over and reminded him in a low voice, "Third Elder, the bet isn't over yet. Han Yunxi won't be able to explain it." Actually, Third Elder had long suspected Shi Yubo. Last night, not only was he unable to tell that Long Tianmo had been poisoned, he also couldn't figure out why Long Tianmo's old illness had flared up. He had even thought of the fetus in fetus situation, but still couldn't explain the relapse. He faintly sensed that Shi Yubo had done something and used some secret technique. However, for the sake of face, he couldn't ask Shi Yubo directly. If it was Shi Yubo's secret technique, then Han Yunxi definitely wouldn't be able to explain it. Secret techniques were things that every doctor learned and researched on their own. Under normal circumstances, others wouldn't be able to decipher them. Seeing that Third Elder still hadn't replied, Shi Yubo grew anxious. He knew that if Third Elder lost this time, the Council of Elders would lose. Long Tianmo was the trouble he had caused. How could the Council of Elders treat him well in the future? Third Elder, I promise you with my title as a director that Han Yunxi definitely won't be able to explain it. If Han Yunxi couldn't explain it, then it wouldn't be considered her win. And if Third Elder couldn't cure Long Tianmo, then it wouldn't be considered his win either. It would only be a draw. Third Elder glanced at Shi Yubo, indicating that he could shut up. Shi Yubo thought to himself that no one understood the art of Jiyu. If Third Elder asked later, he could just fabricate a secret technique. With Shi Yubo's guarantee, Third Elder no longer hesitated. He asked, Qin Wangfei, shall we continue? Han Yunxi hesitated for a moment, then said, Third Elder, didn't we say before that we wouldn't have a public consultation? His Highness the Crown Prince's illness. Why don't we talk inside? Talk inside. This woman was someone who didn't spare people when she was in the right. She actually took the initiative to talk inside. Qin Wangfei, could it be that you're afraid of losing and being laughed at by everyone? Lady Lianxin sneered. She really didn't know how Han Yunxi had offended her. Even Third Elder didn't seize the opportunity to find fault with her. Han Yunxi knitted her brows in annoyance. Still, she patiently explained, the Crown Prince's illness involves his privacy. It's not very appropriate to talk about it here. This was only an excuse. She'd paid so much to get to this point, so of course she wanted to win. But she couldn't talk about the GU arts either, so she could only compromise. Unexpectedly, Lady Lianxin became aggressive. There's no such thing as privacy in a patient sent to the medical academy for consultation. Han Yunxi was using privacy as a reason, not an excuse. She really had considered Long Tianmo's privacy before. The patient is my Tianning's crown prince, not an ordinary person. Han Yunxi looked unhappily at Third Elder. Compared to Lady Lianxin, Third Elder was easier to talk to. But Shi Yubo spoke up at this moment. Esteemed Wang Fei, Emperor Tianhui should have known about the medical academy's rules when he agreed to send your honored country's crown prince here. What a Shi Yubo! He actually brought up Emperor Tianhui like this. Would Emperor Tianhui regret it if he found out? Third Elder, this matter concerns the Council of Elders' reputation. It's not good to hide it. As I see it, we shouldn't enter the rooms, Lady Lianxin added. You've already saved him, so how hard can it be for esteemed Wang Fei to explain the illness? Shi Yubo said meaningfully. Finally, Third Elder made a decision. Esteemed Wang Fei, please. Han Yunxi glared at Shi Yubo, her cold eyes seemingly able to see through him. Shi Yubo subconsciously averted his gaze. No matter what, this woman can't explain Long Tianmo's illness even if she can see through my tricks. Luo Zuishan was anxious as well. He kept looking around the rooftops, but couldn't see Jiyu anywhere. Where had Jiyu gone at this crucial moment? Long Fei Yi looked at Han Yunxi with a complicated look in his eyes. He couldn't guess whether Han Yunxi could explain herself under these circumstances. Esteemed Wang Fei, please, Third Elder urged again. But Han Yunxi didn't hesitate. I don't know. The entire courtyard fell silent at her words, so quiet that even a pin drop could be heard. Han Yunxi actually said she didn't know? Even Shi Yubo and Third Elder were surprised that Han Yunxi would come clean despite knowing full well that she couldn't explain herself. She was about to win, but this woman had given up so easily. Luo Zuishan was the only one present who knew the truth. He now had a whole new level of respect for Han Yunxi. This woman didn't lose out to a man and could take the big picture into consideration. I don't know. Third Elder, we're even. Han Yunxi was very calm. She ignored the strange looks around her and strode away. The bet was over. She hadn't won or lost, so she could leave. She really didn't like this trip back to Medical City. Even Long Fei Yi was stunned as he watched Han Yunxi leave. He couldn't come back to his senses for a long time. Inside the room, Long Tianmo and Qin Wangrong were both paying attention to the movements outside. Long Tianmo's eyes flashed with gratitude. He thought that this woman must have given up the chance to win against Third Elder in order to protect his privacy. Even Imperial Father was gambling with his life. In this world, aside from Imperial Grandmother, only Han Yunxi treated him well. The more Third Elder looked at her, the more he felt that something was wrong. This girl's contrast was too big. There must be something hidden here. Third Elder was afraid of losing, but he also didn't want to end up with an unclear draw. It had to be known that it was a shameful thing to let a girl who was several decades younger than him give up. Third Elder thought that no matter what the reason was, he had to get to the bottom of it. The bet ended like this. No one gained anything. The main character left, so the spectators naturally dispersed. Long Fei Yi was the first to leave. He chased after Han Yunxi. Han Yunxi didn't go anywhere. She went straight back to her room to pack her things. She took off her blood-stained white robe and placed it on the couch. Long Fei Yi saw it as soon as he entered the room. "Are you all right?" Long Fei Yi asked seriously. Tang Li stood at the door and helplessly shook his head. He thought that Long Fei Yi's first question would be whether the white-robed man had saved her. "Very good, I'm fine." Han Yunxi was very calm as she packed her things. At this time, Third Elder came over. Chapter 270. Long Fei Yi was about to ask Han Yunxi why she was in such a hurry to pack, but he paused when he saw Third Elder. Third Elder ignored Long Fei Yi's presence and asked as soon as he entered, "Qin Wangfei, what's the matter with the Crown Prince's chronic illness?" Han Yunxi finally stopped and sneered, "Third Elder, why don't you ask Director Shi instead of me?" Han Yunxi had given up so easily, and now she was speaking in such a tone. Third Elder was even more suspicious. "Qin Wangfei, you're purposely letting the old man win." Third Elder didn't want to lose, but he didn't want to draw either. Even more so, he didn't want a young girl to yield like this. To a 7th-rank medical sage like him, this was an enormous humiliation. He couldn't get past himself. "No, Third Elder is overthinking things. Why should I yield to you?" Han Yunxi had worked so hard to cure Long Tianmo's poison, so how could she purposely let Third Elder win? She was just worried about the effects of the GU arts. GU arts weren't anything good and were extremely harmful. Back then, the medical academy had destroyed the poison sect mostly because of the poison sect's GU arts. There were very few people who knew about GU arts now. If she explained that Long Tianmo had been poisoned by GU, then everyone in the world would know about the existence of GU arts. At that time, there would be a wave of people looking for and learning GU. She would become the main culprit, and the world would fall into chaos once GU arts were revived. A tomboy like Han Yunxi had always insisted that she was a little girl and that the world's prosperity had nothing to do with her. But when faced with this kind of situation, she didn't hesitate to consider the bigger picture. Third Elder was speechless when he heard Han Yunxi's retort. They had argued over this case since the first time they met, and Han Yunxi had won in the end. She really had no reason to yield. The Third Elder thought that he was probably overthinking things. But Han Yunxi finished packing and sat down calmly before continuing, "I'm only letting you win because I don't want the medical academy to get into big trouble." "You." Third Elder felt like he had been played. "Even if you win, the medical school won't get into any big trouble." Han Yunxi won, and Third Elder only promised to do one thing for her. The consequences were not so exaggerated. This stinky lass, she could overflow with just a little bit of water. It seemed like he had come for nothing. He was too lazy to ask any more questions and got up to leave. However, at this time, Han Yunxi became serious. She lowered her voice and said, "Third Elder, you didn't see that Shi Yubor used the GU technique, right?" As soon as she said this, Third Elder looked at Han Yunxi in shock. Regardless of whether Han Yunxi was telling the truth or not, just the fact that she knew about the voodoo technique was enough to make Third Elder nervous. How could someone of Han Yunxi's age know about voodoo? Long Fei Yi and Tang Li were equally shocked. The two of them exchanged glances but did not say anything. Voodoo was a taboo in the medical academy. Now, only the oldest group of people knew about it. Moreover, most of them had only heard about it and did not really understand it, let alone know how to use it. How did Han Yunxi know about it? Seeing Third Elder's shock, Han Yunxi knew that her guess was right. Third Elder really did not see it. Third Elder, Long Tianmo's stomach has a GU worm, so his old disease relapsed overnight. Shi Yubor's so-called chronic ascites doesn't exist at all. Han Yunxi said seriously. All right, she admitted that she did it on purpose. She gave up so decisively to lure Third Elder over. Some words were really not good to say in front of too many people. Third Elder frowned and looked at Han Yunxi without saying anything for a long time. Of course he knew that chronic ascites didn't exist, and could tell that Long Tianmo's relapse had something to do with Shi Yubor. But he always assumed it was one of Shi Yubo's secret arts. He never expected it to be voodoo. Third Elder, the Crown Prince's stomach is a malignant tumor. When I treated the poison in the past, I turned the tumor into blood. Emperor Tianhui saw it with his own eyes. The relapse was caused by Shi Yubo's GU. After the Crown Prince was kidnapped on the road, someone helped him get rid of the GU, but poisoned him instead. Han Yunxi explained everything clearly. She should have said these words in the first place. If she did, she would have won. Now she only said them for Third Elder to hear. Seeing that Third Elder was still frowning, Han Yunxi added, Shi Yubo suspected that the Crown Prince was a fake because he was too self-confident. He thought no one could cure his GU. Hearing this, Third Elder had no choice but to believe it. If Han Yunxi hadn't made a bet with him, it would have been Shi Yubo, Luo Zuishan, and the other elders examining Long Tianmo together. He never believed Shi Yubo's chronic ascites to begin with. He always assumed that Shi Yubo had used some sort of secret arts to make him so certain that Han Yunxi couldn't explain it. Now it looked like voodoo was more likely. Many doctors had their own secret arts. Unless they passed it on to someone else, no one else would be able to understand them. The person who kidnapped Long Tianmo definitely didn't know Shi Yubo's secret art. Normally, only the person who planted the GU would understand the voodoo arts, but it was hard to say if the person was an expert. If that was the case, then voodoo could explain all the suspicious points in Long Tianmo's case. Third Elder was suddenly enlightened and muttered to himself in disbelief, so that's how it is. So that's how it is. Very soon, Third Elder grew alert. Esteemed Wang Fei, who was the person who kidnapped Tianning's crown prince? For now, Third Elder didn't care where Shi Yubo had learned the voodoo arts. In any case, it was impossible for Shi Yubo to escape this calamity and leave the medical academy. He was more concerned about Han Yunxi and the kidnappers' GU expert. I only know that the kidnappers were from the 100 Poisons sect. Many poison humans showed up at the time. Han Yunxi was waiting for an answer to this question. She wouldn't reveal Zhang Yixie's identity directly. She wouldn't even reveal that he was the sect leader of the 100 Poisons sect. Instead, she'd leave a clue for the medical academy to investigate and cause trouble for the 100 Poisons sect. Moreover, once news of Zhang Yixie and Princess Yao's collusion spread in Medical City, Northern Li's imperial clan would definitely investigate Zhang Yixie's actions. Tattletale and exposure weren't good methods, but Han Yunxi felt that this was how things should be for that bastard Zhang Yixie. Whether it was Northern Li's imperial clan or the 100 Poisons sect, Zhang Yixie would have endless troubles in the future. Third Elder didn't know the art of poison, but he was very clear on what a poison human was. If the 100 Poisons sect could raise poison humans, it wouldn't be strange for them to know the art of poison. Third Elder stroked his beard and nodded repeatedly. Soon, his guarded gaze turned towards Han Yunxi. Esteemed Wang Fei, you also know the art of poison? If she could see it, she must know it as well. Luo Zuishan was one of Gu's people, so Han Yunxi naturally wouldn't betray him. She stood up and shouldered her bag, smiling broadly. Third Elder, I don't know the art of poison, so we'll call it a draw today. With Shi Yubo here, you'll be able to answer to the higher-ups. Third Elder was a smart person, so he immediately understood what she meant. Han Yunxi didn't publicize the matter of the art of poison in the consultation hall, which was enough to show that she understood the dangers of poison. She clearly could have won and used the opportunity to spread her name throughout the world, but she gave up everything for the sake of the greater good. Not to mention a woman, even a man might not have such breadth of mind. And this was precisely the breadth of mind a doctor should have. A true doctor saved people, saved the country, and saved the world. She clearly could have avoided him and found the dean of the medical academy to reveal the truth. If she did this, not only would Shi Yubo suffer, even he, the representative of the Council of Elders, would be implicated. However, she didn't. She still left him a way out. A doctor's heart was ultimately kind. She said, I don't know the art of poison, so we'll call it a draw, so carefree. Third Elder looked at Han Yunxi, not knowing what to do. He always thought this girl was conceited, arrogant, competitive, disrespectful, and unforgiving. Even if her poison arts were exceptional, he didn't think she was a good girl. But now, he had no choice but to re-evaluate her. It was the first time Third Elder was so impressed by a junior. With a serious expression, he said, "Qin Wangfei, old man lost. Not to mention one thing, as long as you have any request from Medical City, old man will definitely do his best to help." Unexpectedly, Han Yunxi was too surprised. She'd only done what she thought was right. Just then, she'd even tricked Third Elder with her words. She didn't expect Third Elder to admit defeat and give her such a heavy promise. It really was a blessing in disguise. In the future, she'd have connections and connections in Medical City. Han Yunxi didn't hide her joy. She was truly pleasantly surprised. She cupped her hands and openly accepted the promise. Third Elder, deference is no substitute for obedience. Yunxi will remember your words. Third Elder nodded. Old man still has matters to attend to, so he won't accompany you any longer. Naturally, Third Elder was hurrying off to deal with Shi Yubo. Just where did this guy get his Jiu skills from? This wasn't a question Han Yunxi was concerned about. She only knew that the trouble had been dealt with and that she and Jiu Beiyu were innocent. She didn't know where Jiu Beiyu had gone, but the medical academy was already searching for him. Hopefully, they'd have news as soon as possible. At this moment, the silent Long Fei Yi finally spoke up. Han Yunxi, you're formidable. It was rare for him to praise someone, so he was truly happy for Han Yunxi. He didn't expect this woman to rely on her own abilities to gain Third Elder's approval. With Third Elder's protection, she might not be able to walk sideways, but at least her path would be smooth. Unexpectedly, Han Yunxi actually said politely, "Your Highness praises me too much. Chunxie is already extremely fortunate that I didn't lose your Highness's face." Sometimes politeness wasn't a form of courtesy, but a coldness that kept people 1,000 li away. Long Fei Yi looked at her, slightly dazed. He suddenly didn't know how to reply. "If your Highness has no other matters, Chunxie will take her leave," Han Yunxi said as she tidied up her bundle and prepared to leave. If her previous disregard wasn't obvious, then it couldn't be any more obvious now. As he watched Han Yunxi's back, Long Fei Yi's entire face turned cold. Tang Li couldn't help but shudder. He hurriedly said, "Han Yunxi, wait a moment. I'll leave first." At a time like this, it was better for him to avoid her. Han Yunxi really did stop and make way for Tang Li. However, Long Fei Yi's frosty face finally warmed up a little. Just as he was about to speak, Han Yunxi actually took out a small blue and white porcelain vase. She didn't approach Long Fei Yi and just casually placed it on the table. This was none other than the perplexing butterfly illusion. She became even more polite. "Chunxie is incompetent and can't decipher it. Please forgive me, Your Highness." Note to the readers, you know what's going to happen tomorrow. Chapter 271. The room was completely silent. The warmth on Long Fei Yi's face disappeared. He stared at Han Yunxi coldly. Those deep eyes did not have any luster and were so dark that it seemed like they could suck in everything in the world. He stared at Han Yunxi and did not answer for a long time. This made the originally confident Han Yunxi feel a bit scared. She avoided his gaze again and did not say anything. She turned around, to escape. At this time, he finally opened his mouth. His voice was as cold as ice, just like the first night they met. "What if this king doesn't forgive you?" No one had ever dared to challenge his bottom line like this and ignore his existence like this. At the very least, he never thought that this woman who always looked at him with infatuation would one day not look at him at all. "Han Yunxi, you were the one who provoked this king. There's no such thing as coming and going as you please." Long Fei Yi picked up the perplexing butterfly illusion and walked in front of Han Yunxi step by step. As soon as he approached, a powerful pressure rushed over. Han Yunxi only felt a mountain of pressure. She subconsciously backed away, but Long Fei Yi grabbed her waist and pulled her closer to him. His hand was on her waist. Although he did not use any strength, Han Yunxi felt an inexplicable fear. She was afraid that her waist would be crushed. Han Yunxi slightly raised her head and looked away. She did not want to look at him. Long Fei Yi remained silent as he slowly hid the perplexing butterfly illusion into her medical pouch. His extremely slow movements made her hair stand on end. As soon as he finished hiding it, he suddenly grabbed her chin and used a lot of strength to force her to look at him. The two of them were silent, but the struggle was fierce. Han Yunxi used all her strength on her chin and refused to obey. Long Fei Yi's strength increased bit by bit until her bones hurt. In the end, it was Han Yunxi who was defeated. Her head was forced to face him. However, she still stubbornly closed her eyes. She did not want to look at him. "Open your eyes," Long Fei Yi ordered angrily, sounding very fierce. Han Yunxi remained motionless and ignored her words. Seeing that she had no intention of opening her eyes, Long Fei Yi's eyes flashed with ruthlessness. He pinched her chin and lowered his head to seal her lips with his. Han Yunxi immediately opened her eyes wide, but it was too late. Long Fei Yi overbearingly and rudely plundered her lips. She clenched her teeth and resisted, making him even angrier. The hand around her waist exerted force without pity. In an instant, she opened her mouth in pain. Before she could cry out in pain, her lips and tongue were devoured by him. Unlike the first time when he was gentle and the second time when he was domineering, this time he was almost crazy. The more he kissed, the harder he kissed, and the deeper he kissed. Han Yunxi almost couldn't take it anymore. She only felt that her whole body was about to be eaten by him. Her waist and chin were restrained, and she couldn't struggle at all. Suddenly, Long Fei Yi let go of her chin. He picked her up horizontally and strode towards the bed. Han Yunxi used all her strength to beat him. Finally, she gave up her silence and angrily said, "Long Fei Yi, that's enough. That's enough." He placed her on the bed and finally opened his mouth to roar at her, "That's not enough. I hate you." Scram. Han Yunxi was angry. She stretched out her hand and several poisonous needles flew out. Long Fei Yi dodged and pressed down on the arm that she used to hide the needles. All the hidden weapons on her body were taught to her by him. Once he was on guard, she wouldn't be able to hurt him with a single needle. "What right do you have to bully people? Who do you think you are?" Han Yunxi swung her other hand, but unfortunately, Long Fei Yi pressed it down again. "This prince is your husband, your sky, your earth, and your whole life." "Bullshit." Han Yunxi smashed his face full of spittle. Long Fei Yi, who had severe misophobia, completely ignored her. He coldly said, "That white-robed man saved you." Han Yunxi sneered, "Don't tell me it was you." If he hadn't wanted to save Duanmu Yarrow, she wouldn't have been waiting at the door of the secret room. She also wouldn't have been late. She wouldn't have been pushed out by Mu Linga and fallen into Zhang Yixie's hands. They could have retreated unscathed, closed the door, and let Duanmu Yarrow and Zhang Yixie die in the stomachs of the flesh-eating rats. Everything she'd suffered when Zhang Yixie kidnapped her was because he'd gone to save another woman. "Do you mind?" Long Fei Yi asked without hesitation. There was no need to say what he minded. They both had a tacit understanding. "So what if I do?" Han Yunxi openly admitted it. "Long Fei Yi, if you want to treat me well, then you're not allowed to treat other women well. Otherwise, I'd rather not accept your kindness." When it came to matters of the heart, she was even more domineering than him. Long Fei Yi was about to explain, but the words suddenly stopped at the tip of his tongue. His eyes were filled with indescribable complexity. The wild storm suddenly stopped. This impulsive man who had turned into a demon suddenly hesitated. Han Yunxi watched and watched. Her heart, which was already half dead, slowly sank. What did he mean by this? Did he not intend to answer her? Did he have nothing to say about that matter? After waiting for a while, seeing that Long Fei Yi still didn't speak, Han Yunxi suddenly pushed the distracted Long Fei Yi away. She coldly said, "This lady doesn't mind now. The bridge is the bridge, and the road is the road. This concubine won't cause trouble for your highness, so I'll have to trouble your highness to not disturb this concubine." As she spoke, she stood up and got off the couch. However, Long Fei Yi quietly looked at her and didn't stop her. Han Yunxi tidied up her clothes and hair. She was a bit hesitant, but she still forcefully wiped away the remnants of his breath from the corner of her mouth in front of him. This concubine won't be going to the poison warehouse. Your Highness, please find someone else. After she finished speaking, she turned and left. She was already at the door, but he didn't say anything to stop her. Han Yunxi gritted her teeth and ignored the sourness in her heart as she left with large strides. Inside the room, Long Fei Yi sat on the couch and looked at Han Yunxi's white clothes on the couch. His entire person was terrifyingly quiet. His eyes were filled with complex emotions and the depths of his eyes were dark and gloomy. No one could guess what he was hesitating about at this moment. Tang Li stood at the door for a long time. He understood. He didn't say a word and waited for a long time. This wait lasted until dawn. He thought that a few hours would be enough for Long Fei Yi to adjust. Wasn't he always decisive? But who knew that Long Fei Yi was still sitting there quietly? He shouldn't have any romantic feelings, especially when it came to a woman whose identity was questionable. If he didn't make a decision, he would suffer instead. Tang Li couldn't stand it anymore. He walked in and said indifferently, "Big brother, are you all right?" If he wasn't jokingly calling him Duke of Qin, then he would call him by his full name. He rarely called Long Fei Yi big brother. Since he was young, he had only called him that a few times. His father didn't allow it, and his aunt also didn't allow him to call him big brother. They said that only when a person was willing to give up even familial ties could they achieve great things. When he was 4 years old, his aunt gave him the perplexing butterfly illusion and a great responsibility. She then committed suicide in front of him. Blood splattered on his face. He was only 4 years old. He was so scared that he couldn't even cry. After that, he didn't say a word for an entire year. Tang Li collected his thoughts and patted Long Fei Yi's shoulder lightly. However, Long Fei Yi pushed his hand away and resumed his cold expression, as if nothing had happened. He casually tossed the white robe to Tang Li and said indifferently, "Get ready. We'll enter the poisonous herb warehouse in 3 days." Tang Li seemed to want to say something, but when he saw Long Fei Yi's cold eyes, he swallowed all the words he wanted to say. "Send someone to escort her back. Bring Mu Linga back too. Don't lose any leads on Madame Tianxin in Medicine City." Long Fei Yi threw down these words and disappeared in a flash. At this time, Han Yunxi was in Jiyu Beiyue's room. There was still no news of Jiyu Beiyu. The medicine box he'd brought was still in the room, as if he'd just left. Han Yunxi sat on a warm couch, her arms wrapped around her knees. Her entire person was dim. She sat there from dawn to dusk. She didn't know that the entire medical academy was looking for Shi Yubo. That guy had escaped. He hadn't run out of the medical academy, but hid in the poison sect's forbidden grounds. When Shi Yubo saw a white-robed man appear out of thin air, he hurried out from beside a small tree and respectfully greeted, "Master." This white-robed man was none other than the white-robed man from the Shadow Clan. Shi Yubo had just looked up when the white-robed man viciously kicked him. His ferocity was completely at odds with his white robes, and he sent Shi Yubo flying with a single kick. Shi Yubo collapsed to the ground and spat out a mouthful of blood. "Master." Shi Yubo was shocked. He endured the pain in his chest and crawled to his feet, his voice filled with anger. "Master, this subordinate doesn't understand." Although he called the white-robed man master, Shi Yubo had never known who he was, nor had he ever seen his true face. Shi Yubo's medical talent wasn't good, and he'd always relied on hard work. The only reason he'd been able to reach 6th rank and become a director was because of the white-robed man's help. It was the white-robed man who'd taught him medicine. As for the Jiyu arts, the white-robed man had given him secret manuals. Otherwise, where would he have learned them? He'd planted the Jiyu in Long Tianmo under the white-robed man's instructions. As for why the white-robed man had done it, Shi Yubo had no idea. "You don't need to understand. Who told you to make things difficult for Han Yunxi on your own?" the white-robed man asked. Even someone as gentle as him had a temper. He'd set up this trap to lure Han Yunxi to Medical City and probe Gu's true identity. Unfortunately, he hadn't expected Zhang Yixie to butt in halfway, nor had he expected Long Feiyi to show up. The appearance of these two people had completely disrupted his plan. Fortunately, Han Yunxi was fine in the end. Shi Yubo was resentful and couldn't answer. He'd indeed acted on his own, but he didn't understand why the white-robed man was angry because he'd made things difficult for Han Yunxi in the consultation hall since he'd asked him to frame Han Yunxi and Jiyu Beiyu. Who on earth was this guy? Where did he get the secret manuals of the Jiyu arts? Why did he lure Han Yunxi to Medical City in the first place? There were all kinds of questions, but Shi Yubo didn't dare to ask. He'd asked before, and the answer he'd gotten was, "You don't need to know so much. Go back to the old place. If there's a next time, I won't let you off easily," the white-robed man ordered coldly. At this time, a red figure flew over. Shi Yubo hurriedly hid back. In order to cover him, the white-robed man suddenly flew into the air and exposed himself. This red figure was none other than Jiyu, who'd been chasing the white-robed man for a long time. If the white-robed man hadn't been seriously injured, how could he have been chased for so long? Chapter 272. In the crater, after the flesh-eating rats dispersed, Jiyu immediately rushed out. He had completely forgotten about Mu Linga. He searched high and low for Han Yunxi but couldn't find her. Helplessly, he returned to the medical clinic and bumped into the white-clothed man who was about to leave. Seeing the white-clothed man, Jiyu naturally wouldn't let him go. He had been chasing him since last night. In order to cover for Shi Yubo, the injured white-clothed man was caught up again. Seriously injured? Is the poisonous beast in your hands? Jiyu raised his eyebrows and asked. He didn't know about Han Yunxi's situation. Seeing that this guy was covered in blood and his face was as pale as paper, he was obviously seriously injured. After the Shen Gold door opened, he disappeared. Could the disappearance of the poisonous beast be related to him? If it was, do you think you could still be alive? The white-clothed man smiled. Due to his gentle temperament, he didn't seem to be anxious even when Jiyu caught up with him. Then how did you get injured? Jiyu was very curious. It wasn't easy to injure someone from the Shadow Clan. Long Feiyi was with him. Zhang Yixie couldn't have done it even if he was poisoned. You and I have no enmity. Why are you so entangled? The white-clothed man asked indifferently. As soon as he said this, Jiyu sneered, "Hehe, who says we have no enmity? If it weren't for the fake map, he and Mu Linga would have arrived at the secret room long ago and wouldn't have fallen into the snake cave." He wasn't afraid of being poisoned or bitten by snakes, but he still had to put on an act in front of Mu Linga. "Did you steal the map of the crater?" Jiyu asked coldly. The white-clothed man calmly shook his head. "I didn't steal it. It was you." Jiyu was very sure. Without the map, how could he have led the way so smoothly? The white-clothed man still shook his head. "I just took a look and burned it. I really didn't steal it." Jiyu was stunned at first, then exploded. "You." He didn't draw his sword because he was used to using it. Instead, he flicked a seed at the white-clothed man. "You're courting death." Other than Han Yunxi, he had never been teased like this. This guy was actually making fun of him. How hateful. The white-clothed man did not expect Jiyu to know this kind of hidden weapon technique. He did not have time to dodge and was shot in the shoulder by the seed. Pain immediately came. It was as if something was drilling into his flesh. Could it be that this seed was poisonous? He had the Jiyu technique manual, but he did not understand poison or Jiyu. Very soon, he discovered that he was wrong. This seed was not poisonous because the seed actually used his flesh and blood as the soil, and suddenly sprouted from the soil, growing an unknown bud. Controlling flower technique. The white-robed man was shocked. He didn't expect it to be such a strange technique. No wonder he was in so much pain. The roots of the sprout were drilling into the depths of his flesh. This sprout looked small, but it would quickly absorb his blood essence and grow rapidly, occupying his entire body. Once this plant bloomed, it meant that his body had become fertilizer for the flower. The white-robed man did not hesitate. He took out a small knife and stabbed it into his shoulder, forcibly uprooting the sprout. His entire shoulder was bleeding profusely. Although this method was cruel, it was the only way to deal with the controlling flower technique. "You're quite knowledgeable." Ji-yu admired him, but immediately flicked a second seed. This time, the white-robed man successfully dodged it. "I didn't expect you to be so secretive." The white-robed man was serious. "Knowing this won't do you any good." Ji-yu stood on the tree. His red robes fluttered. Amidst his flirtatious and arrogant appearance, there was a hint of hostility. He was indeed secretive. If it wasn't for his anger, if it wasn't for his last resort, he rarely revealed his true abilities. The white-robed man did not understand. With Gu's unscrupulous and lawless character, how could he be so patient and not reveal his true abilities? He did not continue to tangle with Ji-yu. He turned and fled. He was injured and could not defeat Ji-yu. However, he had a good foundation in Qinggong. He could still escape. "Stop right there if you have the guts." Ji-yu immediately chased after him. But the white-robed man's words stopped Ji-yu in his tracks. "Rather than chasing after me, why not go to the consultation hall to check on Miss Yunxi's situation?" The furious Ji-yu gave a start. Even his tone of voice changed, revealing an unconcealable surprise. "Han Yunxi, she went back." The white-robed man smiled wordlessly and took advantage of the chance to flee. If you liked someone, a cloudy day could turn into a sunny one in an instant. Ji-yu did not chase after him, but turned to fly towards the medical academy. Han Yunxi was at the consultation hall. Had she escaped from Zhang Yixie's clutches? Or had someone saved her? She hadn't found the poison beast's blood, so she'd be bullied at the consultation hall. He wouldn't allow that to happen. The white-robed man didn't run far. It wasn't until Gu's figure vanished from sight that he appeared beneath the tree and muttered to himself, "Ji-yu? Hehe. So it really was you." By the time Ji-yu returned to the medical academy's consultation hall, it was already empty. Ji-yu immediately ran to Han Yunxi's room, but didn't see Han Yunxi. Instead, he saw Luo Zuishan sitting inside, waiting for him. "Where is she?" Ji-yu asked anxiously. Luo Zuishan had come here because he was certain Ji-yu would show up. He told Ji-yu everything that happened at the consultation hall, but before he could finish, Ji-yu grew curious. How did she cure the poison? What? Luo Zuishan didn't understand. As he saw it, Han Yunxi had only gone for a follow-up examination. Hadn't the poison been cured long ago? Ji-yu avoided the topic. Although he hadn't caught the poison beast on this trip to the Sky Pit, he knew that Han Yunxi had nothing to do with the Tang clan. The ties between Long Fei Yi and the Tang clan had nothing to do with him. He only cared about Han Yunxi's origins. He had to admit that this result was very disappointing. If Han Yunxi was a member of the Tang clan, then she definitely wasn't the poison girl he was looking for. He could rest assured. Unfortunately, after eliminating the Tang clan, the poison girl's origins were a mystery. The only clue left was Madame Tianxin. So she left with Long Fei Yi? Ji-yu changed the topic. Probably. Luo Zuishan didn't know that much. When he came over, Han Yunxi and Long Fei Yi weren't there. Now that the matter was over, the couple naturally had to leave. "Are you sure she's fine?" Ji-yu asked again. Luo Zuishan was very sure. Based on the way Han Yunxi had taught Duanmu Yarrow a lesson, that girl was in good shape, both physically and mentally. Ji-yu was relieved, and his smile was brighter than the sun. That's good, that's good. Only the heavens knew how worried he was. Although he was never serious with Han Yunxi, he really couldn't bring himself to laugh when something really happened. Ji-yu was about to leave, but Luo Zuishan pulled him back. "Chia, where did that bastard Shi Yubor learn the Ji-yu arts?" Luo Zuishan had wanted to ask for a long time, but Ji-yu always appeared and disappeared like a ghost. He never had a chance to speak properly. Shi Yubor was indeed suspicious, and Zhang Yixie's Ji-yu arts were also very curious. However, Ji-yu didn't care at all. He hated the medical school, and he was afraid that the medical school wouldn't fall into chaos. He only regretted that he hadn't revealed the matter of the GU arts at the public consultation this time. The GU arts have been lost for so many years. Before Luo Zuishan could finish speaking, GU waved his hand and strode out the door. Luo Zuishan was angry and anxious as he chased after him. Couldn't this brat have a proper conversation with him? He had specially come here to wait for him for another matter. I just came from the Council of Elders. I heard that the young miss of the Mu family went missing. She was supposed to arrive yesterday at the latest, but there's still no news. If Luo Zuishan hadn't mentioned it, Jiu really would have forgotten about that girl. However, as soon as he thought about it, he slowly narrowed his eyes, a dangerous aura on his face. Where is she? That damned girl actually repaid kindness with enmity and pushed Poison Lass out to feed the rats. TSK, he really underestimated her. How would I know? Luo Zuishan couldn't help rolling his eyes. He should be the one asking this question. Where was she? Hadn't she been following him all this time? Find her. Jiu was very decisive. Luo Zuishan thought that this guy had found his conscience and knew that he had to take responsibility for a little girl's safety. Who knew that Gu's second sentence would be, "Damned girl, you better not let me find her." He wouldn't let off anyone who dared to hurt his Poison Lass, even if they were from the Mu family. Jiu strode out of the room, leaving Luo Zuishan bewildered. How had Mu Ling-er provoked him? Mu Ling-er liked him so much and went along with him, so how had she provoked him? Long Fei Yi and Tang Li had already left, while Long Tianmo and Qin Wang Rong were preparing to return home. Everyone thought that Han Yunxi had left, but she was still nestled in Jiu Beiyue's room, lost in thought. Esteemed Wang Fei, His Highness has ordered this subordinate to escort you back to Tianning. The guards knocking on the door interrupted Han Yunxi's thoughts. She listlessly replied, "Withdraw, I'll go back by myself." Esteemed Wang Fei, this is His Highness's order. The guard didn't dare leave. Unexpectedly, Han Yunxi suddenly shouted angrily, "What? His words are orders, but this Wang Fei's aren't." The guard was scared out of his wits, his face ashen. Although he hesitated, he didn't dare say another word. But Han Yunxi actually opened the door and stared at him coldly. His Highness isn't going back. His Highness and young Master Tang Li left first, the guard replied foolishly. Oh, Han Yunxi replied faintly without asking any more questions. Esteemed Wang Fei, you should come back with this subordinate. Don't let this subordinate. Before the guard could finish, Han Yunxi flipped out. Scram. Yes, this subordinate obeys. The guard scrambled away. Everyone said that his mistress had a good temper, but why didn't he feel the same way? He thought that he should hurry and report this to His Highness. Han Yunxi returned to her room and slammed the door shut. She really hated this kind of surveillance. She didn't want to go back to Tianning, but she didn't know where she wanted to go. She didn't want to stay in the medical academy, but now that third elder was protecting her, she wanted to stay for a few more days. Han Yunxi was still in a daze when a fut sound came from her medical pouch. She quickly opened it and saw that the little squirrel had already opened the lid of the rosemary and was about to pour it into its mouth. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.